All right. Hello, welcome. Sunday Speedrunner Spotlight back at it again. Streaming a little it in advance because doing something this Sunday, but of course, YouTube, you'll see it at the usual time. So, yeah, anyway, welcome to the show, Znernicus. Hello.
Thanks for having me, GTAs.
Yeah, thanks for being on. I know you've been in the speedrunning scene for quite a while, so lots of history to discuss, I
Yeah,
believe.
many years. This is true. Well, I guess should I just explain how I got started or when I got started?
It sounds like a good place to start.
Yeah. So, what was it? This was like it's kind of hard for me to remember exactly when I began speedrunning or started knowing about speedrunning because it's like a gradual thing for me. It wasn't like, oh, I discovered speedrunning and I became a speedrunner right away.
Hmm.
I had seen here and there, like in the late 2000s, I guess, that decade. Um, let's just say like between 2006 and 2010, for lack of more accurate dates. I had started to see videos on YouTube pop up, a lot of like TAS runs or like the occasional um, RTA speedrun, although people weren't calling them RTA back then. What was it called? Single segment or segmented?
Mm.
Actually, segmented runs were fairly popular, but even before finding out about speedrunning, I found some glitches that were documented on various websites for old games that I like to play. And Donkey Kong 64 is like it is the first game I ever had. Like my parents bought it for me when I was like 8 years old when it came out, or younger than eight then, 7, I don't know, whatever, in 1999, 2000, something like that. And I didn't play it, during my teenage years for a while. But then online, I found some forums like that had glitch information about the game, and I was like, oh, you can like go through walls, you can visit the banana fairy at the start of the game, weird stuff. And then I guess from there, I found out about the existence of Speed Demo's Archive (SDA), and they had some games that I knew about or I was interested in, so I would watch some of those speedruns just to. And this was like raw footage of the game being played, no commentary, nothing was live, and I didn't really think about doing it myself at the time. But it wasn't until like 2011 when I was playing Portal 2, which had just come out earlier that year, and Portal 2 had a in-game leaderboard for the individual chambers called Challenge Mode. And so you could see like ranked among your friends in Xbox Live, for example, like who was faster than you. And then on the PC version, it's like a global leaderboard. Um, so when I looked up like what were some of the fastest records on that, uh, then I was like, oh man, I want to learn some of those strategies. And then I also found out about the thing that really kicked it off for me was finding out about Twitch streaming, live streaming, because although I had like a sort of passing interest in glitches and video game content when I was younger, I didn't know that there was like an audience for it where you could actually interact with people real time and like make friends doing it, and it wouldn't be that like uninteresting of just. Not that you can't enjoy speedrunning by yourself with no audience, because some people do that, but for me, it was always a bigger motivator to be part of a community, and that I think helped keep me going, at least after the first initial rush of wanting to do it. So at some point in like May or June of 2011, I had like a lot of free time that summer in college, and I think Zimbabwe is the person who actually introduced me to Speedruns Live via a SDA post on the forums for Portal 2. And he was like, hey, why don't we do a race? And I was like, a race? What? You can do that? Like, he's like, yeah, just register like at Speedruns Live, and we'll do a Portal 2 single segment race. And that was the first time that I had ever like done speedrunning with another person. Up until that point, it was like I just played the game by myself to see like how long it would take me to beat it, and I didn't have splits, and I didn't even use a real timer. I like looked at the clock when I started and looked at the clock when I finished. Just was like, okay, that took like about 2 hours and 10 minutes or something like that, you know. Um, but yeah, after finding out about challenge mode, learning some speedrun strategies, then learning about speedruns live and Twitch in like the same day was really what triggered me to like play all the time. And then I was starting to stream doing full game runs, and people were watching, so I kept doing it. And then I met other runners online, and it kind of just snowballed from there. And then one of the other first live stream speedrunners that was active at the time was Ring Rush, who you may know of him, or I'm not sure, but he's nowadays mostly doing tool assisted runs, but he used to be an RTA speedrunner for Donkey Kong 64, the any percent category. And I just happened to find him doing attempts uh, that same month, I guess. Uh, so I was like, oh, okay, I would like to speedrun DK64 as well at some point, but I was already very focused on Portal 2 at the time, so it was like my secondary game when I first started, even though it was the game that I had technically learned how to do glitches in years before. So it's kind of funny. I like had different games in my priority different years.
It
And a
all
lot of
comes full
people
circle
might,
eventually.
yeah, I guess it comes full circle because now I'm like pretty much mostly just focused on DK64. I haven't really done anything with Portal 2 in a lot of years, and we could get into why, but uh, that's pretty much the history or timeline or sort of when did I discover stuff. And then ever since 2011, I would just say like I've been a speedrunner since 2011. I just haven't been the most active the entire 10 plus year stretch. So there have been years where I've been more into it, and I think every year at least I've been doing some speedruns. Like I've never gone on a hiatus that long, but
Keeps
I'll be
pulling
like
you
active
back
for a
in.
couple months and inactive for a couple months because there are other things I focus on in life outside of this.
That's fair, I think.
Yeah.
So you gotta enjoy it a healthy amount sometimes.
Yeah. And like have a goal
Oh
and
yeah, of course.
uh, have community feedback and stuff. Because like the other thing is like there's these other sort of fringe games that I like to speedrun, but not enough to the point where I will like go out and spend extra free time doing it if nobody's interested. So like a good example of this is Burnout, the
Mm.
original Burnout, because the Burnout series might be kind of well known, but the first game like seems like almost nobody plays it, but it was the only one that I had growing up, and I liked it a lot. And it's a racing game, so there is no like speedrun tech. It's just like how good are you at this racing game type of deal. But I was like, I might as well give it a try. I think this was like 5 years ago at this point, and I was like, oh, there's like nobody who does. No one's ever done a single segment speedrun of this game before. It's not even on speedrun.com. Like, can I, contact the Discord for Burnout enthusiasts, make the leaderboard, submit a first record type of deal. And now there's like a few people, but it's still not very active. But it's one of those games where it's like if at least one other speedrunner shows interest and starts submitting runs, I will probably get back into it for at least a couple months just to compete with them, share strats, whatever.
Hmm. So you tried to set up like uh was this before speedrun.com?
This was after speedrun.com.
Okay, so yeah, you can just submit the game thing.
But
Because
I have been speedrunning since before speedrun.com existed.
yes.
And I remember talking to Pac at one of the GDQ events, and he was kind of talking about the project, like before it became a thing. Like he was
Hmm.
saying that he wanted to release or to create a website to consolidate leaderboards and stuff. And
Boy, did that
at the
work out.
time, it definitely worked out. So yeah, and I was one of the, I guess like the clients, if you think of it from
Oh.
a professional sense, that like he consulted with me and other speedrunners in the Portal 2 community early on in developing the site to make sure that it had the features that a speedrun community like us would want.
Hmm.
And there were a couple of features that we had to specifically ask for because Portal 2 has like a co-op mode. So like the default leaderboard implementation is like one runner, one row, you know. So we had to say like, "Oh, but we have a two-player mode in our game. Can you set it up so that, you know,
Two
like
names can show up.
two
Yeah.
names could show up and share a PB?" And then like if you get a better PB with someone else,
Yeah.
you know, then you want your time, your personally best time to show up, but it shouldn't overwrite the PB of your other partner if that's their best time.
Hmm.
So like weird actual programming requirements that we had to like give them to develop the site. And obviously it's come a long way. There are so many more features now than when it first started,
Hmm.
especially like with moderation tools and other things like the the whole like community resources pages and all that stuff. I don't think that was there from day one, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
But
what
it
it
was
looked
cool to
like
know about
at the
it
very
early on.
start. Yeah. Um, I don't. Do you know what year? Like around what time that was?
I have a hard time remembering because
Yeah.
like it could have been 2015's HDQ event where we spoke about it, but like you could probably look up the day that speedrun.com launched and that would I would assume like whenever I talked to him about it, it would have been like the HDQ before the year that it went live.
Hmm.
But I don't remember because the thing is I went to like HDQ 2013. That was my first uh, in-person event that I attended. And then I liked it a lot, so I went the next year, and I liked that a lot, so I went the next year, and then I just kept going the next year for 8 years in a row. And so I have like, a, in general, like memories of GDQs, but it's easy for me to mix up which year which thing happened because I was there 8 years in a row.
That's
So it's
fair.
like, yeah. I would guess that it might have been 2015 or 2016, but it could have even been as early as 2014 because how early on did we actually migrate to that leaderboard? It was a long time ago now.
Yeah. Because when I joined, it was already like the prominent place to do everything. Because that would have been like mid to
Yeah,
late 2017. So I don't know
yeah,
what like the super early days of the site were like.
yeah, and I even don't remember like that many details, but I know that Pac is like the guy that I talked to uh, about that website when it was first starting.
Hmm. Well, yeah, he's the guy. So
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
remember
but
that much at least.
yeah. So since you said you started speedrunning and streaming in like 2011,
Yeah.
give or take, did you have to like do stuff with SDA then?
Yes. So SDA had like um, you know, specific rules about single segment speedruns that they kind of like blanket applied those rules to all games. But a big shift that happened in speedrunning since those days is that now each game's community kind of has their own discussions about what rules are best for that game or suit that game, uh, regardless of whether it's exactly the same as the rules for the speedruns of other games. So, and I think like ultimately having that flexibility is a good thing because then each community can like deal with the nuances that exist in their games. But back when I started, it wasn't like that, and the sort of culture of speedrunning mentality has shifted from those days. In some ways, it's better. In some ways, it's worse. Like I actually do miss. Um, well, let me explain it first. So when I started, single segment meant you play through the whole game without loading any saves. And if you know how a game like Portal 2 works, it auto saves first of all regularly, but it also has a quick save feature on the PC version at least, which is the only one that really matters for speedrunning mostly. I mean, it's like it's not competitive across consoles. Um, and so the rule was for single segment, it meant that you couldn't load a quick save. But I had to even argue for being able to load an autosave if you die, which sounds ridiculous, but
Hmm.
strictly to the letter of the rules of a single segment speedrun, if you had to reload a save at all during the run, it was going to be considered a segmented run, even though you're doing it in one sitting. And yeah, this is where like RTA is born out of single segment. But the thing is, RTA was specifically like real time as measured by the passing of time. But because this game is on PC and it has long loading screens that vary a significant amount based on your hardware or just like how well your computer is running that day, RTA is not a good metric either, because then you have like all the randomness of load times introduced. Uh, so what we needed was a like an RTA minus loads situation, but there wasn't the technology for that at the time. At least not like in terms of a timer tool that will automatically pause on load screens and unpause when it reloads, like we have now with Live Split. But at the time, it was like you had to record an in-game demo in the source engine and do your run, and then at the end of the run, go back and time the length of all the demos of the segments, because the demos will like end at the end of one chamber and then begin a new demo at the beginning of the next chamber, and you had to manually go back through your demo files, check the tick length of each one, and in that game, the game runs at like 60 ticks a second. Like that's just how that game's engine works. So you have to count up all the ticks in your run divided by 60. That's the total length of your run in seconds. And so during the run, you would not know if you were actually on PB pace because I mean you could like use a real timer, but if your loads were particularly slow that day, it could look like you were behind if you weren't. And if your loads were particularly fast, it could look like you were ahead and you weren't. So it was mostly like down to feel. But the other big thing was like, yeah, you weren't allowed to leverage loading a save. Um, and then I argued on this DA that okay, at least if you die, you should just be allowed to go back to your set, autosave point, because otherwise it's like your run is dead an hour in, and you just lost time anyway. So like, why why are you worried about people doing this? Um, But anyways, nowadays it's completely different. Nowadays, the standard is use quick saves as much as you want because you can save time by going for harder tricks and just saving right before you do every hard trick. Or just saving before you do like literally any trick or any section of the game, because any mistake you make, instead of it losing whatever amount of time it would have taken you to get back to where you were, you just reload your save and you've lost like half a second for the same mistake. And that I don't really enjoy as much, and that's a big part of why I don't like main running that game anymore, because I kind of liked the fact that you had to actually be consistent to not lose time. And like nothing against any of the runners who are using quick saves and liking it that way, but for me it was like a weird extra thing to have to juggle when running the game. And it
That
felt
makes sense.
like it kind of invalidated the ability to play consistently and not make mistakes when there's like so little on the line, I guess. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean that's just how it goes. Like
Yeah.
you use the tools the game gives you to its fullest extent. That's what
Yeah.
speedrunners do. So
It is what the culture of speedrunning is these days and sort of naturally progressed to. And it wasn't that way back in 2011 or 2012, or it wasn't even really until like after a couple years of maturity into the speedrunning scene getting bigger that people started doing that.
Yeah, what I've
And
learned
there's like,
from oh sorry.
oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say what I've learned from hearing about what SDO was like. It was a lot more strict back then with like
Yeah.
their submission process and the rules that they define. Like they would just reject a run if they thought it didn't look that cool or something.
Yeah, they had like I don't know how exactly their moderation worked, but they definitely had a team of people who were reviewing each run and would have to sort of agree if the run was up to quality.
Hmm.
But they wouldn't necessarily be like experts in that game, so it would have to just look good.
Hmm.
um, but you could always like talk in the forums and explain the strategies that you used and like what went well, what went wrong. But they did definitely want to foster like a culture of like achieving very clean, very polished runs, which as a beginner is really hard to know what you can expect from yourself. Because when I got started, I definitely did not know how good I could get speedrunning, or how good anyone could get, for that matter. Um, until you've been in around it for a while and you start like seeing what people who've been running for years can do on live streams, like how can they be that consistent? And then even like with my own PBs over the years, I think the time that I submitted to SDA was like an hour and 13 minutes. And I thought like, oh, that must be really good because there wasn't a huge single segment community at the time. So that was the record. Um, and it was like more than a minute improved from my previous PB, which I don't know. My PBs were something like an hour 21, an hour 19, an hour 18, an hour 17, an hour 16, an hour 15, and then a very high 114. I think it was 114.59. And then I got like 113.37, and it had leet in the numbers. So I was like, that's the one. No, not that's a joke, obviously. But the reason is because it was a big PB. And I was like, okay, that felt really good. I'm going to submit that to SDA. But then, like, I ended up running the game for another year and a half or 2 years after that. And I ended up with a 104, like
Hmm.
a huge improvement. And like I never would have imagined that so much more could be done with a run when I was only like 6 months to 1 year into running the game.
So where does all that time save come from?
Well, a good chunk of it is actually more people were getting active in the strat finding, but I would say that there's no way that that accounts for more than like 3 or 4 minutes of the remaining time. A lot of it is just actually getting better at all the little things and
Mm.
watching small improvements add up. And uh, it might not be the case in every speed game, but at least for all the ones that I do where there's 3D movement involved, there's so much like little optimizations that you don't necessarily feel when you're playing the game as a beginner or an intermediate runner. Like you don't even know that you could save time in that section, but then later on you'll learn, oh, like this way of moving through the section is slightly faster, or I can turn this way instead of this way and it saves a fraction of a second. And you just like find all these little things, or you just get like your muscle memory more comfortable with certain sections and perform them a little quicker.
Hmm.
And then there's like what you consider a big mistake to be, like gradually shrinks the longer that you play a game. So like I don't know, like when I first started, like I wouldn't really bat an eye at losing a couple seconds on like I misplaced a button or I misplaced a cube on a button in a chamber, and like I immediately I forgot about that mistake. I forgot that mistake even happened when I got to the next chamber. Um, but a couple years later, it's like, oh, that might be like one of the biggest, like top 10 mistakes in the run or something. Well, no, I don't think I ever got that good. But that's how good the runners that have the record today now are. Like, if they lose like 2 or 3 seconds in a chamber, it's like that is probably going to be one of the biggest mistakes that they can afford to make in the
Hmm.
whole run. Assuming that they like, unless they like play out of their mind to make it up.
Yeah, it seems like such a hard game because of how long it is, and then its movement, its source movement. It's
Source
PC.
engine games
So,
are really hard to optimize, like
mhm.
notoriously difficult because you have variable speed, first person 3D movement. I don't know how people aim so fast. Like, yeah, the reason I don't excel to the point where I can like really challenge the record holders in the challenge mode version of the game is because you need like crazy fast reflexes, and I'm not even sure if it's reflexes or just muscle memory that gets really honed, but you need to be able to like move your mouse all which ways and like shoot portals in every direction like in a flash without even being able to like visually process what you're seeing, and I find that really difficult um, to like move faster than my eyes can
Hmm.
handle. That doesn't really happen in any other game that I've tried running.
Yeah.
It's just a Portal 2 thing.
Yeah.
But it might happen in other games. I don't know. If any game where you're like constantly moving your viewpoint, I guess, in fractions of seconds.
Yeah. Sounds like an FPS kind of thing.
It's definitely an FPS thing. Yeah.
And I'm not familiar with a ton of that genre in terms of speedrunning, at least. But Portal's
Yeah.
always like the kind of main one I hear about. One of the more popular speedruns of an FPS, I'd say, if not
Yeah.
the most popular.
I don't know. I've never looked it up, but it definitely felt like there was a lot of people who enjoyed Portal running, and
Mhm.
I can see why. Like
Its
I'm one of
community
them.
is large,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. 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 It's always had a huge fan base,
Mhm.
which spills over into the speedrunning community as well.
Yeah. So, what kind of like skips were you doing in that game, or could they even exist back then?
The first skip that I remember learning, what would that be? It was mainly things that I had seen people do in challenge mode that I just like worked out. I basically checked to see if you could do it in the full game run. But it's funny, even though there weren't that many people doing runs of the game, there were a lot of people theory crafting and glitch finding,
Mm.
even back in 2011 when the game just first came out. Like, actually, there's a post, day one of the game being released, there's a post on SDA where someone explained how they found the crouch flying glitch, which is like one of the most broken glitches in the game. It's like basically allows you to enter one of those blue funnels that carry you through the air and then leave the funnel without reactivating the gravity in the game. So you can just like float around and fly to the end of chambers in certain cases. So like that was known day one. So yeah, I mean, uh, I'm not like the kind of runner who found a lot of skips over the years. I've found a few optimizations. I think what is my biggest claim to fame in Portal 2 is I discovered the elevator timings
Mm.
because in the challenge mode version of the game, when you get to the end of the chamber, there's like a checkerboarded flag, like a finish line, and as soon as you touch that, you're done. But when you're playing through the whole game, like I wanted to do, you have to enter the elevator, and GLaDOS usually has some dialogue line she's saying, and when the dialogue ends, then it'll fade out, go to the next chamber. But the way that's implemented, and I didn't know exactly how it was implemented at the time, but I started to notice a pattern that there are like certain loading triggers in the elevator shaft as it's moving, and it's like whatever one you hit next after GLaDOS finishes her dialogue will be the trigger to send you to the next level. It's actually kind of like frame rules, except they're
Mm.
not evenly spaced.
Yeah, yeah.
But the point is like, yeah, well, it's not like frame rules at
Imagine
all
an
actually, because
elevator.
the dialogue can start at any frame.
Mm.
So yeah, so it's not like your speed is capped in intervals, but you want to enter the elevator at such a time where like as soon as she's done the dialogue, you'll be just about to hit the next trigger
Mhm.
and lose the fuse and not be if you're a little bit too early, then you'll be past that trigger and have to wait like the full gap to the next one. So I worked out like which word you should wait for in the dialogue to when you should enter the elevator so that you get a quick fade.
Mhm.
And that does add up a little bit over the run. Um, but in terms of the skips we were doing back then, I'd have to go and watch like a really old PB video. I know that we definitely had crouch flying because that was like known from day one. Uh, we might have had the cube throw to skip a long cutscene in chapter 8. Yeah, that was probably known a long time back. Um, but the other thing that's interesting about Portal 2 is like, and the source engines, is that you have to like learn how to move fast. It's like its own entire skill outside of learning how any of the tricks work, is the bunny hopping mechanic. Like you can't just hold a arrow key and move forward at full speed. You have to like curve and weave your aim and your strafing through the air to like take advantage of like turning acceleration and stuff. So like just being able to move at a reasonably high speed is its own skill that takes a long time to develop, which is kind of weird. Um, yeah, I don't know if it would make sense to like talk about every
No, yeah.
little skip and when it was found because there's so many of them, and there's so many that have been found since I haven't like been keeping up with the game as well that I haven't learned how to do yet. For a while, I tried to like at least learn the new tricks when they were found, even though I didn't end up going back and improving my PB with them. But now I kind of lost track of that. So if I ever want to go back and try to, I don't know, get like a sub 1 hour time, there's a lot of stuff I'd have to learn, and I'd have to get used to either using quick saves or just submit a run without them and just take the inherent disadvantage. But there is a variable on speedrun.com. They were nice enough to request like to respect my my wish that you don't have to use them if you don't like them, and you can technically filter the leaderboard by people who haven't used quick saves and see who's the fastest without that advantage. But yeah.
That's good. Um, yeah, I've seen a lot of the newer stuff where you have to like precisely shoot like I don't know. I don't even know if it's pixels with how the game works, but like
Oh yeah,
absurdly
seam
precise.
shots.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah, seam shots are like one of the more recent innovations, and they're really weird because for a long time, like certain seam shots were known to exist. They were known to exist, but like there was no way you were gonna line up your crosshair that quickly, that reliably to hit them. And then people started messing around with like keybinds that would change your sensitivity
Hmm.
in such a way that you could like set it up, which is really weird to me. I don't know how I feel about it. It's one of those things where you take every possible advantage that's presented to you,
Hmm.
but it gets into the realm of like controller remapping in the middle of a run, which is dubious in certain contexts, but
It's
whatever. I
definitely a
mean, it works for
debate.
this game. It's a debate. It
Yeah.
was a debate. There have been many heated debates over the years
Oh, I'm sure.
between speedrunners that have different mindsets, and like nobody really hates each other. We all just want to run the game our way, or a way
Heated
that we
but
find fun.
respectful debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's actually interesting. You Someone figured out that if you lower your resolution to like a really small fraction, then the tiniest like movement on your mouse, you can kind of like align it to move any angle change that you want or you need to line yourself up with a pixel shot.
Hmm.
So you'll like lower your sensitivity to some like pre-calculated number such that like you just move your mouse like up one dot and right one dot, and you actually need like a mouse that has relatively low DPI to do this. Otherwise, you can't like physically do that reliably.
Hmm.
Um, and then so you'll move like up a predetermined angle, and then you'll move to the side a predetermined angle, and then you can do your shot. It's so weird.
That does sound absurd. I've never
It's
heard of
it's
anything
definitely
quite like that.
absurd, but people worked out the math and theory crafted it, and it's in runs now, and people are definitely saving time with that. And it's not like an unfair advantage because anybody can look up how to do it, and the resources are all there. But
Mhm.
it's definitely like a weird case of pre-run prep for your controller setups
Mhm.
that just doesn't exist in console running, and so in a lot of ways, running games on console is a lot simpler. There's not as much weird stuff to think about.
Yeah. PC running has always been too complex for me to understand sometimes because, I would always be like, how do you handle all the different frame rate stuff and stuff like that? Like I know for
Yeah,
competitions, if it's a PC game, they'll like limit a frame rate so it's fair because some people can have advantages
yeah,
based on stuff. I'm just like, I like the NES. Everyone's NES is the same, dude. It's great.
yeah. I mean, there are certain like console titles that have been released on many different uh, like versions of console hardware, and so they
Mhm.
run differently. But if you're all playing on a fairly easy to access console and it runs the same speed and doesn't have like version exclusive stuff, then yeah, it's pretty convenient
Mhm.
to not have to worry about variable frame rates and loading screens that vary and uh, different like controller settings. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all a complicated mess for me to
Mm-hmm.
understand at least, but I'm sure, yeah, it's hard for everyone, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean it's as hard as you care to make it, I guess, because it also
yeah.
depends on like where you're at with speedrunning. I think if you're just like a new runner and you just play the game the way that you know how to play it and don't worry about all the like minutia, you can still like enjoy the process of speedrunning and improving your time until the point that you're like, oh, I actually am like taking this seriously and I want to implement every strategy that saves time that I can possibly do. And then you start getting into the weeds of all these weird details and stuff.
Mhm.
But I tend to like when that kind of getting into the weeds is more about just pure game knowledge and less about like uh manipulating console commands and controller commands and stuff. And that's why I like stuck with DK64 so many years because that game has just a really rich uh, glitch library.
Oh
Or,
yeah.
I don't know,
Oh yeah.
like I don't know if library is the right word to use, but basically it's extremely glitchy, and there are so many variations of like how you can use certain tricks in many different. Like you can apply one glitch to like 100 different places in the game, and out of bounds is really prevalent. And then you've got like mooncakes, which are really fun, and you can do them almost anywhere if you know what you're looking for. Um, and it's just like you have so many options, and figuring out which ones are best and which setups are best for you, because
Mhm.
that's the other thing is like sometimes uh, it's not like every runner will do exactly the same movement, exactly the same setup, the same way, because we kind of like discover individually what timings or what like ways that we can try to get a trick the most consistent. And sometimes it comes down to runner preferences because there
Mhm.
are so many glitches that you'll actually have the choice over like three different ways that you want to get through this wall. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, well, I like phase walking. Oh, I like using the skid jump method. Oh, I like backflipping in the corner. Uh, or I like ledge clipping here. Like you literally have like three or four ways to get from point A to point B, and that's not counting the intended way to get there. Like that's all just to cut the corner and go out of bounds.
I was gonna say you could definitely fill a library with the amount of glitches in that game.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
that's
Actually,
crazy
documentation is getting difficult
because there's so
because
much.
like we have a dedicated documentation channel in their Discord, but you have to kind of know like what to search for
Yeah,
because
Discord
otherwise it's just
isn't the
like
way, I don't think.
it goes on forever and ever and ever. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll sign up for StratDB at some point if that gets bigger. Do you know about
Mhm.
StratDB?
I've heard a little bit about it, but not a ton.
I don't know a ton either. I just know it's a website that's setting out to solve that problem of like
Yeah,
overly complicated game glitch documentation.
yeah. Discord is certainly not the answer. So uh, there
No,
needs to
Discord's
be
been really great
yeah.
for community like resources though. and
Yeah,
just
it's
chatting
great
with
for
other people that
communication.
are
It's not
into
great
it.
for archival purposes. And that's
No,
that's
not
that's the
necessarily.
difference. So yeah, I'm glad there's, and like you can set it up on SRC kind of to have some information here and there, but yeah, a
Yeah,
website
SRE is good
dedicated
for at
to it.
least linking your resources
Mhm.
in one place, but I don't think it would be like the database itself.
Yeah, no, I like the idea of it there being a site for documentation, because
Yeah.
that just makes it easy, and it'd be hard to lose information there, I guess. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll have to research it a
I'm
little
kind of
more.
eagerly awaiting news about that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I'll need
I'll
to.
keep my eye out for it.
I'll have to learn more. But yeah, I can only imagine how complicated that game is to like keep track of everything. So probably be perfect.
I think it would be a good fit. In many ways, I feel like DK64 is like the little brother of Ocarina of Time.
Hmm.
Like they're both N64 titles. They're both extremely glitch heavy. They have like a relatively long 100% run or like and a very short any percent run, and like it's to the point where like people started inventing different middle categories to have like more fun with the game without having to do everything. So like you have all dungeons and like MST and Ocarina of Time, and we have like no levels early and all keys, which is like similar to like an all dungeons thing, like but
Hmm.
yeah. So um, the other really cool thing about both games that they have in common is bingo.
Oh yeah.
And like as far as I'm aware, speedrunning bingo started in Ocarina of Time, but it's actually perfect in DK64. Like it it's the recipe for a good bingo game is you have a lot of different like either collectibles or like categories of things that are in the game that you could have to do, and have like a relatively open world exploration type thing where like you can do things in a very non-linear fashion, which obviously works well in Zelda games anyway because they are literally like an open world game. But when you have a glitch or a set of glitches that lets you easily get into every level early from like near the start of the game, then it sort of turns what was originally a semi-linear game into an open world game, which makes it a lot of fun.
Hmm. Yeah. So I know Bingo was pretty huge on Speedruns Live in like the mid 2010s. So.
Yeah, I mean it's still kind of one of the things that I enjoy the most these days with speedrunning,
Mhm.
um, is doing bingo races, and uh, there's like a lot of different variants of bingo now that I've discovered, like battleship bingo, where you like
Hmm.
place you like choose within the grid of squares where your boats are going to lie, and your opponent does the same, and so you have like your own secret arrangement of boats, and you have to try to sink your opponent's ships by completing the squares where their boats are, like battleship.
Hmm. I have not heard of
So
that. Wow.
it's a really fun twist on bingo. um, you can thank Runner Guy for introducing me to the concept, and like a million other bingo variants that he does on his
Yeah, I know
streams.
about the lockout where once you complete an objective, the other person now can't do that.
Yeah, that's another classic bingo variant.
Yeah,
It's not
but
one of my favorites, but
beyond
yeah.
that, I don't know all the other ones. The Battleship is very interesting sounding.
Yeah, there's actually an event called Bingothon that just
Mm.
like is a marathon of just bingo events, which is kind of interesting.
It's unique,
Yeah.
and
So,
sounds like there's plenty of different. Well, first of all, there's tons of different games it works for, but now apparently there's
yeah.
dozens of variants on the format as well.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I never would have imagined that you get this much replay value out of one game, but that's ultimately what I've found with speedrunning communities. It's like I have barely played any new games over the years because like there's so much potential in a couple of games that I just happen to get hooked on, and like there's also already so many games with like rich, vibrant speedrunning communities out there anyway. That like I don't even have like a thought to give to like playing the latest whatever new video game releases on the market and stuff.
Hmm.
Like the last time I bought a new video game to play might have been something niche like the Stanley Parable 2, just because
Hmm.
I thought the first one was funny. But yeah, that might be it.
Yeah, I don't buy too many new stuff either, unless it's like the next Mario game. It's like, well, okay, they kind
Yeah,
of have to do that, but
yeah, I might consider if it's like a game in the series that I run. Yeah.
hmm but yeah,
Um, but yeah, I
I'm not
think
a
ever since
Mario
I
person.
started speedrunning, it's like I've just been playing the same three games
Hmm.
for like 90% of the time that I play games at all.
That's what happens.
Yeah,
That's how
which
it
is it's
goes.
fine,
But yeah,
but it's kind of funny.
to go back to Portal 2 real quick because there was a big what do they call it? Like the segmented runs, but it's like a group effort. I know there was a pretty big
Oh
project and you
yeah,
did a lot for
I
that.
was part of the first one of those, the first round of group segmented running. Yeah, that was fun. It was kind of um, like you would take a group of runners and each person try to get the best segments on each map, and then you would combine it all together. And that was the first iteration of it. But then, and this was mainly organized by like source runs, I think, in terms of the presentation of these. Um, and they've done like a lot more for Half-Life games as well that I've watched. I've never ran those games, but I've followed speedrunners who do them, and uh, they started like segmenting mid map and doing all sorts of like really crazy precise stuff that it kind of felt like you were watching a task, but it was actually technically performed by a group of runners. It's just that the segments could get like smaller and
Hmm.
smaller to the point where it starts to resemble a task where you're like controlling the input every frame,
Yeah, that
except
reminds
you're
me.
performing the input every tenth of a second or
Yeah,
half of a second or whatever, depending on the need to like how precise you had to be for that section.
yeah, that reminds me of what I assume would be like a modern equivalent is have you seen like the Mario Odyssey things for every moon it'll be someone else with a better segment to the next one. So it's not just like
No,
the whole kingdom, it'll be like every moon. So there'll be segments that are
that's
like a couple
cool.
seconds. So it sounds kind of like that, but a more modern version of it.
How do they pull that off in a game like Odyssey, which is like I don't know how you create segments in a game like that.
I think well, what's nice about the moon thing is whenever you collect one, there's like a little cutscene jingle that goes off. So I think like during that, it'll like take the gameplay from someone else and go into the
Oh,
next
so they like
segment.
stitch it together,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the video. Okay.
But
That's
yeah,
pretty cool. I haven't seen that. I'll have to look it up.
but yeah, it sounds very similar to this Portal 2 thing from
It
back in the day.
is.
Yeah.
It's just that this was like with the PC game, you could make it quick save and reload the same quick save and try the
Hmm.
next section as many times as you wanted.
So a little more splicing, I guess,
Yeah,
but
it's like a heavily spliced run that it's funny. It's like a midway point between a full run and a TAS.
mhm. Yeah. Well, my internet's being a little weird.
Yeah,
So,
I can still hear you. Okay.
all right, that's good. Yeah, I've had a big storm problem today, so yeah,
Hmm.
hopefully we're all good. But yeah, anyway,
Seems okay to me right now. Yeah.
so when did that for because I know it was a pretty big, very popular video, I think. Um
The source, the ones that I was a part of on the Portal
yeah, the
2
Portal
thing,
2 ones. I feel
that
like
probably was in 2014 or 2015.
yeah,
I think
I feel
2014
like
sounds about right.
it was quite popular. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like got
I
quite a
mean,
bit of
I
eyes on
can
it
try to find it on YouTube again. In
because
terms
I
of
mean, I know
popularity
about
in
it
speedrunning,
and
it's like one of those things where I I never really bought into the whole like social media trying
mm,
to increase my reach on it. But I think it's mostly just because I was fortunate enough to play a fairly popular game when I started. So, like, people naturally found me without me having to try to advertise it.
Mhm.
And, like, after my first HDQ appearance back in 2013, I got some couple thousand, I guess, like, new followers on Twitch. And then I
God.
never really had to, like, look at my follower count after that because it's like that's still like the biggest jump in followers that I ever had at any point.
Yeah, that's
And then it was like at that
crazy.
point I had enough people that whoever was watching that actually found it interesting long term stuck around, and like that was good enough.
It's crazy
So
that
I'm
back
kind of
then you could get thousands of followers from GDQ. Nowadays it's like 100 if you're lucky.
yeah. I don't know like why it's lowered. I would have thought because the audience is bigger these days, but maybe
Mhm.
because there have also been so many events over the years that
And there's
maybe
also
by
so
now
much content that yeah.
it could be that there's more content sort of going around in general, but it's
Mhm.
also that I get a sense that like a lot of people who are watching GDQs nowadays, it's not like the first time that they've heard of it anymore,
Mhm. Oh
and they
yeah.
might only like go and follow runners if like I don't know, like when I first started, I don't know how best to describe this, but when I first started, I felt like still the majority population of people who were interested in video games in general had no idea what speedrunning was. And so it was like a cool novel thing, and now it's been around long enough that I imagine there's less of those people who like don't know what it is and are like excited to jump in and watch.
Oh,
Um,
I hear it
but there's
talked
still like
about
a
every day now somewhere on the
yeah,
internet.
now it's like it feels like a large group of people are aware of it and the audience for it has somewhat stabilized. I mean, I'm sure it's still growing steadily, but
Mhm.
it doesn't feel as much like
It's not as
a niche
secluded as
thing
it
that
once
no one.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not secluded anymore. So I think you won't be seeing like really huge jumps in following because
Yeah.
most of the people who would have already known about it or known that they could like it have already gotten into it or have already started following it.
The floodgates opened, but only so much water can go through it.
Yeah. So yeah, let me see. Source runs. If I look it up, there's so many of them now. Wow, this is interesting.
Oh.
Portal. Oh, they started doing leased portals runs, right? Segmented leased portals.
Oh, so
That's kind of cool.
minimal portal usage. Okay.
Minimal portal usage, right? Because that's another variant on the challenge mode. So there's a
Hmm.
record for fastest completion, which is like regular speedrunning stuff, and then there's also the lowest portals record,
Hmm.
which I never really got into that much, but you can find some very niche tricks in those because
Yeah,
like
that's
it
cool.
might be a thing that like is a really long slow setup. It's kind of like least A presses in Mario,
Hmm.
but you'll people find really inventive ways around using a portal that could be crazy in how precise they are.
Yeah, that's cool. But so you said the project you worked on was like 2014, 15 area.
Okay, I just found it. It's from it just says 9 years ago. What's that? September 2014.
Okay.
Yeah,
So almost
and
a decade ago.
oh,
It's good.
actually it does have like 800,000 views on YouTube.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I consider that a success.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these games are all popular, these source
Oh, of
games,
course, yeah,
especially
yeah.
Portal and Portal 2. So,
But I
it
like
doesn't really
segmented run
surprise
from
me, but
back
it's cool.
then being popular is. I mean that's
Yeah,
a
I
big
don't know how
number.
many views it had like back in 2014 when we released it, but probably
Sure, but
a chunk of this because the way YouTube goes, it doesn't recommend old videos, so
yeah, not.
probably most of the views are from 2014, 2015.
Mhm. So yeah, you were. I know you're part of it, but I guess I don't know to the extent. Like, do you know how many segments you kind of have? It doesn't have to be. Just a guess
I
is
did
fine.
have the most like number of
Oh,
segments.
really? Okay.
I'm pretty sure because the thing was that there was only like 5 runners that were actually working on this. I
Mm.
think no, six runners, and a couple of runners were like really good at specific chambers that had really hard tricks that like
Mm-hmm.
even I didn't know how to do them. So they did like their specialty chambers, and I was kind of like the full game runner of the group. I mean, there were a few of us. Paraculus was also part of this, and he's a full game runner, and so was Isolytic. Um, but we had Zype, who like is probably the best challenge mode runner to ever have touched the game. A baby and Spyronite, and they both had a baby was like the specialist that could do specific, really difficult tricks, and had a couple of challenge mode records uh, for those chambers. And then Spyronite was another full game runner slash. He also had some records in challenge mode, I think. But yeah, the thing was like at some point the project was like 2/3 done, and no one was like actively working on it. Like it kind of had been put on the shelf for a couple months, and then I was like, okay, but like we can't just like leave it hanging because like people are gonna start finding new tricks and like invalidating the stuff that we already worked so hard on. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just like did a push to get like a lot of the end of the run done quickly, and I think that's why I have a lot of the segments there because like I kind of just filled in the end game. But in the first 2/3 of the run, it's like more
A
more well
healthy
split
balance.
between
Yeah.
a healthy balance of all the runners doing segments and stuff. And some of the times it's like I may not be like the perfect runner to do this chamber. Like I said, I didn't have very many challenge mode world records. So I kind of like did my best and moved on.
Yeah.
But visually it looks good.
Mm-hmm. So, what was the time on that?
57:15.
And you
And
could,
now the world record is lower than
yeah, I
this.
was
The
gonna
real
say,
a single person's like single segment run is 56 now? 55? What is it? I have to go to speedrun.com to see it. But
yeah,
yeah, it's crazy how far this game has come.
yeah, it's absurd that one person can beat. Well, I obviously,
55. Holy
yeah,
cow.
obviously that was made a decade ago, but still, like,
Yeah,
impressive nonetheless.
for sure. For sure.
Although, I don't know if like any more skips were found. I have to assume
Many.
that, yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
that
uh,
obviously makes a difference, but
yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are definitely big skips that were found uh, over the years. And I would have no idea of knowing like exactly how many minutes were saved
mhm,
just from that. But for certain, the like play quality of the current records is out of this world. It's
mhm.
like really very few mistakes. The few that are in the run are a couple seconds here and there. Like maybe 5 to 10 seconds would be your biggest mistake in the whole run, I think. I mean, I could be a little bit off in my estimations, but that's kind of the feeling that I get.
Yeah, and do you know kind of what the record was when that video was published?
Um, I can find out because it was during the time that I had the record,
Hmm.
so it would just be in between one of my PBs. So it definitely wasn't the 104 that I sort of stopped at. Um, that's my current PB from 2015. Uh, so it was like 6 months before that. So it was probably like a 106 or a 107, if I had to guess.
So almost 10 minutes faster. I mean,
Yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Now,
I still can't
again, I'm
believe that the 101 TAS Indica 64 is under 4 hours now. That blows my mind.
uh
Because I mean, now that we're talking, it's different than a segmented run, but it's like
yeah.
still a RTA record to a task being like over like it's like an hour and a half faster.
Hmm,
It's nuts.
interesting. Yeah, we'll have to get into that. Now I'm
Yeah.
interested in learning more, but to, I guess, wrap up the Portal 2 discussion. So yeah, that whole segmented thing was almost 10 minutes faster, and that was
Right.
using all the known strategies back then. That
Yeah.
maybe not all of them you implemented into the record at the time, but like I assume a
Um,
good amount of them. So the fact that it's
well,
that
I
much
mean, there are
faster,
certain strategies that are like too difficult to pull off
sure, sure.
in a long, like in a full game run. Like it's just too inconsistent to even want to go for it. Doesn't save enough time. So yeah, it had some of those that I wouldn't have done.
Hmm.
Um, and even like small variations of routes through chambers that are just much more difficult to execute, but they save like a half a second or a
Hmm.
second, so that all adds up. Um, but I mean, yeah, it had every like skip that we knew existed at the time, and we did have to go back and re-record some segments when new skips were found during the making of it.
Well, yeah. Do you know how long that project kind of took to complete?
Mm, not exactly. I didn't
Okay.
like. Maybe if you had asked me like in 2015,
No,
then
yeah,
I
it's
could tell
fine.
you. Because I think I wasn't using this computer even like this is my PC I've only had since like 2018 or 19, and I didn't necessarily transfer like everything that was on my old one, and it might not even be on my old laptop, but it might be on like a spreadsheet somewhere. We definitely had like it's probably on a Google Doc that we had a spreadsheet of all the segments uh, down to like the ticks, the number of ticks long that each segment was, and each person would go and update it when they got a new segment
Hmm.
until we were done. Um, so maybe I could find it in Google Sheets. It's
Yeah,
the
I
best
don't
chance,
need an
but yeah.
exact answer or anything. I was just
I
curious
would
because
say it started in 2012 or 2013.
oh, really?
I don't
Okay.
know. It might have taken like a whole year, but it's just because we weren't particularly quick about it. Like I said, there was like a thing where like progress had slowed down,
Hmm.
and I just kind of like took it upon myself to finish a lot of the remaining segments near the end of the run. Oh, here it is.
That's fair.
Portal 2 done super.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, this document may not have dates, but it does have our thoughts on the segment. I forgot about this.
oh, so you kept track. It was almost like a mini leaderboard, like a segmented leaderboard. You could like
Not
put your
exactly. It's like each row is the segment number,
yeah,
and then like there was no sense in tracking leaderboard. So whoever got the
no,
new fastest segment overrode the old one. And
yeah,
then everyone would watch that segment and comment on whether they thought it was good enough or if anything was missed. Like if any improvement looks uh, like evident.
yeah. I just meant like
Um,
if you look at a SRC run submission, you'll see like the time, the runner, the date, and a comment about their performance. It sounds like it was kind of the same thing, just obviously not a leaderboard.
yeah, I mean, I could find an example here. So it's like, uh, here's one. It's like, okay, my comment is now, or Zype's comment, now featuring 20 ticks faster. And then someone overruled that one and said, now featuring 2 ticks faster. And then someone else found a new strategy and it's like turret boost is too strong. So yeah, this was one of those where multiple people we had to redo the segment, not just to see if we could beat each other's time, but then a new strat was found and it
Hmm. And it's funny
overruled the other ones.
remembering that a tick is like 0.01 seconds.
Yeah, or 0.03 is it? No, point 0.0167
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, I was thinking 0.03 because there's a weird thing where like the game would only register the length of the segment to an even number. So
Mm,
even though you
interesting.
technically had 60 ticks, like every segment, unless it was unless you used quick saves to break it into smaller pieces, by default, if you just load in the beginning of the chamber and end at the end of the chamber, it was always an even number of ticks long. So you
Hmm.
could actually only save time in like increments of 0.03.
I see. So like almost 2 ticks.
Yeah. No, exactly 2 ticks.
Or oh, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, it was like always an even number of ticks long
Oh,
for
okay. I get it.
for a full chamber.
That's interesting, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess to wrap up the Portal 2 stuff, the conclusion is you were one of the first like runners of that game. It sounds like
Yeah,
full game,
for
full game.
for
Yeah.
full game
To
specifically,
clarify,
because
yeah.
yeah, like there were other people who, like I said, like day one found some glitches and posted about it on SDA, but I don't think they were either just finding glitches and not necessarily doing runs, or there were also like a lot of people who were just doing challenge mode runs within the game's inbuilt leaderboards and stuff. Um, but the challenge mode community didn't necessarily overlap with the larger speedrunning community at first, because people discovered the challenge mode leaderboards within the source engine games, and like that community kind of developed in parallel to the like wider full game speedrunning community that had existed on Speedrunner's archive and whatnot. And so I had like kind of a foot in each, and wanted to do the full game run, but was like watching actively the records on the individual chambers
Hmm.
and trying to pull from them where I could.
Yeah, and then you had the record for at least a few years, on and off maybe, but
Yeah, like most of the time between when I started until 2015, I had the record for the full game of single player. Um, and there were like a few times in there where I had the co-op record with someone, uh, but that didn't usually last very long. And there was a couple times where the single segment record was challenged or beaten by like Spyronite, for example, um, who was another one of the runners on that segmented run.
mhm.
And then I kind of like had a time that I was really happy with in 2015. That was like a 104, and yeah, I kind of didn't do any, didn't have any more PBs after that. I took a little bit of a hiatus from the game that turned into a 10-year hiatus that didn't intend to be that long, but it just I was busy doing other stuff, and then the game had a lot of changes happen really fast, and I didn't keep up.
Well, hey,
And
you helped
I'm
pioneer the game, so I mean, there's something to be said about it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and it's like I never want to say that I officially quit running the game, or anything. I might come back to it at some point, but it's just one of those things where like it'll only happen if I feel it. Like
Hmm.
if I just the motivation has to come from somewhere.
Yeah,
I'm not going to force it.
well, that's smart. All right. Well, anyway, Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah. All right, DK,
Yes.
my current favorite game to run.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I mentioned it's the first game I ever played as a kid, so it has the nostalgia factor.
Mm-hmm.
It's super glitch heavy, which makes it kind of goofy. Um, that's one of the things I like about this game is a
Oh, it's
lot of the
very goofy.
glitches look funny,
Oh yeah.
and like even if they're even if like the mystery around them isn't quite as strong as it would have been when I was new. Like, wow, look at how weird this is. Isn't this like crazy? How do you do that? And it's like, okay, now I know how all of it works, but because it looks so silly, it's still fun. And it's got a really active community too, these days, and everybody's so friendly, and it's like just a lot of fun to watch everyone in the community improving, finding strats, routing together. We do bingo races. We've met up at some events, uh, like like in HDQ every year. The one of the reasons I would keep going, even if I didn't have a run in the marathon, was that I knew I'd be meeting up with like 5 or 6 different DK64 runners, and we do like in-person bingo races and stuff. And that would be like what I spend half the week doing at a GDQ. Um, and just this year, uh, we went to No Reset in February, and we actually, for the first time ever, did a 5-person co-op, one player per Kong, 101% run.
Hmm.
which was like a dream idea that we had a couple years back, a few of us, and we finally made it happen at an event. So I was DK, and Alphonium was Tiny Kong, Corn Cob was Lanky Kong, OBO was Diddy Kong, and Bismuth was Chunky Kong. And the five of us handed off the controller, uh, doing our Kong's part of the run, and it was really neat.
Well,
And we did it
that's a
at
fun,
like,
just a fun idea. Good
yeah, it was a
concept. Good
fun,
concept.
good, yeah. I wish it was recorded in better quality because,
Mm.
unfortunately, although we like all managed to meet up and go to the event and do it, none of us had like a great streaming equipment with us, so it had a lot of frame drops. But
Yeah.
I'd happily do it again, um, if the opportunity comes up again.
Yeah. I don't know much about No Reset, um, but
I've only been there once. It's in Quebec. It's in
mm,
Montreal.
got it.
Um, and it's mostly a French speaking community, but there's also like enough English that like it wasn't an issue for me. I don't speak French. Um,
Yeah, that's French Canada, so that makes sense.
yeah.
All right. Well, that's cool.
But it was cool.
Hmm.
It was a nice. It felt similar to Pace, but maybe
Hmm.
a little bit smaller, or maybe about the same size. Yeah, a little smaller, I'd say.
It's nice that they can get a good amount of people there then, because that's a, I guess, not a super popular area. Um,
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't know how many like Montreal speedrunners there are, so I guess I can't really speak on that matter, but
A fair bit. At least Bismuth's from Montreal.
at least one person.
Yeah. No, but there's clearly a lot of people,
Hmm.
who went to that event that were from Canada. Actually, I was the only American runner in the group of five.
I
Everyone
thought you were
else
gonna
was from
say the only
Canada.
American runner there. I was gonna be like, whoa, really?
No, no, no. Just out of the five DK
Okay,
runners that we were doing
that's still
the co-op
interesting
run.
though. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. I like hearing about the smaller events popping up all over the world. So
Hmm.
yeah. It's nice for every country needs their own little event they can put together.
Yeah, for sure. I think the more like regional events there are, the more fun it'll be
Hmm.
overall. Like to be able to go to your local speedrunning event,
Hmm.
or your regional speedrunning event, and then you've got the bigger ones like the Games Done Quicks.
Yeah, Europe's got its event, Japan's got its event, Australia's got its event. It's like
Yeah.
they're all over the world. It's really cool. So, um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess DK64.
Right. So DK64. I don't know what haven't I said about the game exactly. Okay, so my favorite category is 101%
Mhm.
because it's got everything.
Literally
And
everything.
it's got literally like all the important collectibles that, well, everything that counts towards the game percentage, which is, nearly everything in the game. And it's over 5 hours long. And I've just been chipping away at it over the years. When I started, I had like a 8 hour or something run my first time, or maybe 9 hours. I don't remember, something in the 8 to 9 hour range. And the first time that I ever like held the record, it was a 620 something, because like C Fox had 630 something. Yeah, so 620 something would have been like my first world record on that category back
And when
in
did you start?
2015, 2014. Like I started not long after running Portal 2.
Oh, okay.
It's just like I was like running Portal 2 most of my free time that I dedicated to speedrunning was
Yeah.
for Portal 2, and then I would like on the side
Got
play
it. Okay.
DK64 and
So
start to
a
learn the
couple of
tricks.
years, really.
So I like kind of started DK64 in the same year that I started Portal 2,
Hmm.
but it was like, let's say like 80% of my time was put into Portal 2 and 20% DK64 until like 2015, and then it kind of shifted the other way.
Hmm.
Whereas like most of my time is put into DK64 now since then.
Got it.
And yeah, it's another game where, especially with these long categories, where like you never really know how much time is out there for you to save,
Hmm.
because with runs that are like hours long, um, like you're inevitably going to have some mistakes, and you just gotta like keep going, try to figure out solutions to sections that are inconsistent or that like tend to troll you a lot. Like this game
Yeah.
has a lot of enemies that just like they do random stuff each time, so you have to like figure out how not to get wrecked by them.
Hmm.
Like there's these Kasplats. There are 40 of them in the game, and you have to collect the blueprint that they hold by like defeating them. So they're like one of the bane of speedrunners in the game because they have a shockwave move that can like hit you from far away, or they can like if you try to go up close and knock them down, sometimes they'll hit you out of it. Um, there's one of them that's like in shallow water, and you have to jump on his head to kill him the fastest way, and he can like wobble you essentially. Like he can like stun lock you for like 10 seconds at a time if you're unlucky. So um, yeah, there are like little things like that that it's like there are like 3 or 4 different ways you could go about killing one of these guys, and each one is like a little bit faster than the next, but a little riskier than the next. So it's a lot of like experience trying to figure out like what's like trying to solve the equation of like consistency versus what's the fastest, and
Hmm.
finding that like line where this usually works and it's pretty fast versus like I'm just going to go for the fastest possible option, and if I get unlucky then oh well. And I always try to find like a middle ground
Yeah.
between those two things to like push it where you can, but don't do something stupid,
Hmm.
especially in a long run where like you're not going to reset if you lose even like 15 or 20 seconds uh, doing something dumb, right?
Hmm.
It's just going to count against you at the end of the run. So, uh, it's a lot about consistency and just being comfortable with every section, knowing the route like the back of your hand, and that's something that I didn't even have to like work hard to study at. It's just like when you do the same category route over and over again, you just start to it just starts to stick in your head. So
Hmm.
even though it's like a 5.5 hour run, I kind of can do the whole thing without notes. I
Hmm.
only use notes for like 2 specific mini games because I can and didn't feel like memorizing them.
Fair enough. I mean, that's a lot of memorization already, anyway. So.
Yeah, it's like a thing where it's like very easy to just look at my notes while I'm doing it without losing any time.
Hmm.
So I never had much of an incentive to memorize them.
Yeah.
But there probably will be a point where I just do the whole thing with no notes.
Yeah. So
But yeah,
you.
what else do you want to know about the game? Or were you wondering about it? Because it's so there's so much to talk about that I kind of don't know where to start.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. It's this incredibly. It's like the pinnacle of broken game, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Where
for
oh my god,
starters, walls don't exist,
no,
right? I'll just start with that. And
they don't.
floors do exist in the best possible way. So you go out of bounds, and the game keeps you at the height of the floor that you went out of bounds from. So unlike a lot of other 3D games that have wall clips, you're not like stuck falling into a void, uh, where you're kind of like limited in how much you can be out of bounds. Now in this game, you can be out of bounds from anywhere. You're not going to fall anywhere. You can even raise your height out of bounds and then keep that higher height to like get to other places that you wouldn't otherwise be able to reach from your initial out of bounds spot. What else is there? There's skewing, which like you can rotate your Kong's model backwards, so they're like walking on their back, and then you can just walk through any wall, which is great. Um, there's tag barrel storage, where you can like trick the game into thinking you're in a tag barrel when you're actually not, or you're like still controlling your Kong outside of it, and that leads to all sorts of weird stuff like being able to grab a golden banana from a different part of the level without ever having loaded that section of the level, and therefore the banana is just there, even though you're supposed to have to do like a 3-minute mini game to load it, to unlock it. But you have to grab it blindfolded, essentially, because you're stuck looking at the tag barrel screen the whole time. So that's like the craziest trick in the run.
Wow.
And it's killed. It's like the final boss of 101% right now. It's called Rabbit Race Skip. It's a tag barrel storage. It's what we call a spawn snag of a golden banana, which is where you grab it from another part of the level without being able to load the area where the golden banana is in. And
How deep
it
into the run is that?
saves 5-ish hours. Oh, it's
Oh
not quite that. It's
no.
like 4.5 hours in.
Oh
It's like,
no.
yeah, it's like definitely near the end of the run, and it saves like 3 or 4 minutes if you get it. And
Yeah.
so like, I have to get it to PB. I've had 5 or 6 runs that were like on PB pace that just lost it on that trick. So yeah, it's awful. But it's like not so hard that it wouldn't be worth going for. It's just that you can't see where you're going, and every failed attempt is like another minute and a half down the drain.
Wow. It's just absurd.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've looked into like trying to reroute the thing so that it's earlier in the run, but like you can't easily do it without sacrificing a significant amount of time. And it's like, are you really going to just put the harder trick 2 hours into the run to lose 30 seconds? Like, I don't want to reset 2 hours in either, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of like uh, running games of varying lengths, I've come to like learn that you need different mentalities for different lengths of runs. And I think like that's always been a nice thing about having gotten into different categories early on in speedrunning, because like one of the first types of speedrunnings I did was the challenge mode, which is like on average like a 20 to 30 second level.
Mhm.
So there you're resetting for like any tiny little thing right out the gate. And then on the other end of the spectrum is like 5.5 hour long runs where like you only have so much time in the day. I don't want to reset in more than like 5 or 10 minutes into the run, and only if something really stupid happens that like should not normally happen. Um, like worst case scenario, I might reset like an hour and a half into the run when we get to the DK arcade. If you fail the arcade and you lose 2.5 minutes, then it's like, okay, sure, I might start again. But I have this kind of like point where it's like, if I get past whatever 2 hours in, I'm finishing the run or the run is dying. That's it.
Mhm.
So you don't really go into it taking as many risks, and you have to play to what is possible within like a lot more falls on practice at that point, because you can't afford to just like grind runs. You have to actually practice every section in advance and be ready for it when you're there in a real run. Which you could say the same for like every category, I guess, but when you're doing like the 20 to 30 second long stuff, it doesn't feel that way, because like every attempt can just be practice.
Yeah.
um, and then there's everything in between. So like any percent is like 25 minutes right now,
Hmm.
and that one is my least favorite to run, but I actually have the record in it right now, which sounds weird, but um, it's funny. It's like any percent has changed so much since when I started running the game. Because back in 2012, any percent was like you actually had to free the rest of the 5 Kongs, and then like make your way from the first level to the second level to the third level, and then after that point you could skip to the final level and beat the final boss. But now it's like you don't free any of the other Kongs. You go straight to the final level, um, and then you go skip into the third level. You fight that boss with just DK, and then you can do the final boss. And now the final boss is like 40% of the length of the run,
Hmm.
which is silly. But Yeah. So it's not as fun, but it's very nerve-wracking when you're on a good run and you get to the final boss because it's like all the hard stuff is like compressed into the first 10 minutes of the run. And if you finally get out of that on a good pace, it's like, oh my God, I'm like 5 seconds ahead. I better not choke in this 12-minute long boss fight. So like, it's such a weird feeling.
How hard is the boss
Trying to
fight
do.
in a speed
It's
run?
not hard, but you have to like be on your toes. I don't
Hmm.
know. Like you just have to like be ready for the timing of everything, or else like you just don't want to like lose focus and lose 3 seconds doing something stupid because you have to like wait 30 seconds for a queue, you know.
Got it.
It's not quite that slow paced, but it feels really slow paced compared to the stuff that came before it, you know.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, the boss is like it has a lot of downtime. That's for sure.
Yeah, it has the most downtime in the run, for sure.
So,
Um, but yeah, any percent has changed a lot um, from where it started. So it was like the record was like 48 minutes, I think, when I first started watching, or maybe 49 minutes.
mm,
And like I never held the record in the 5 Kong era. Um, like I think the record got down to like a 42 or 41. No, not 41. I got a 40. Yeah, it was a low 42-minute run that Ring Rush had. And then I eventually got like a high 42. I think it was like 42.40 or something. That was like the best that I had done on 5 Kong. And then DK Helmerly was found by Ring Rush, and that changed everything for that category. And at that point, like people started getting more interested in like actually creating a middle category because we didn't really have an active middle category before then. But now we have no levels early, which is like a 2 hour long run,
mm,
which is pretty fun. It's still like my least played category out of the main three. I guess being in that it's it's not one of the purest categories like any percent and 100%
yeah.
or 101%. But it is actually a lot of fun. It's probably the best category for a beginner to pick up because beginners learning any percent have to like contend with, do I do the hard strats because they're the fastest route, except it's like really annoying to have to even figure out how it works, let alone like reset over the harder tricks all the time, or do I just do like the beginner friendly unlock all 5 Kongs? And there's like no right or wrong answer, it just depends on like what your goal is with the game. But in a no levels early run, you get the chance to like visit every level, unlock all the Kongs, use them all a decent amount, and like see the whole game, but not have to collect everything.
Hmm.
So, like, I think it's nice that we have that as our middle option. And we've held a couple of community tournaments, like no levels early tournaments, where it was like a double elimination bracket style.
Mm.
Um, and I won those tournaments 2 years in a row, which
Oh,
I'm
look
very
at
happy
that.
about. But it was not easy. Like they were actually really close. Like both times I won from the losers bracket technically.
The comeback king.
Uh, Not really.
Oh, okay.
I think I was in winners finals one of the times. And I like lost the first round of grand finals or something like that.
And so, but you have two chances because you were
Like I have two chances and
positioning.
I
Yeah,
got it
yeah,
on
yeah.
the second
Got
chance.
it, got it.
And then
Okay.
the other one I fell in probably winners finals.
Okay,
And I
well,
had to like make 3 wins back or something.
I see. Well, I mean, it
But
worked
yeah,
out.
shout outs to Zerulda and uh, Toyomana. They both like defeated me in those tournaments.
Yeah, we haven't had an official Mario 1 like tournament in a while. We used to have like yearly Worthless ones. But the good news about that
Yeah,
was
I
felt
imagine Warpless would be a similar
yeah.
kind of scale run. I
Well,
mean, it's a lot shorter, but
it's a
given
lot
the length of
shorter.
the game, like it's like 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. So obviously it's like a huge difference. But the
Hmm.
whole game is like that much smaller, so makes sense.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the the last official Warpless tournament there was, I won it. So like I'm just undefeated now. It's good.
Nice.
It feels good. So
Very good. Yeah.
um but yeah, I know there's a big difference between the Nintendo 64 version and the Wii Virtual Console version too. Like VC is
Yeah.
optimal, right?
Yeah. VC is faster. So mainly it's like just doesn't have any slowdown from lag,
Mm-hmm.
like frame rate dropping and stuff. So it is purely faster. They didn't like patch any of the glitches on the ROM itself. I think it's the same ROM pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. So there are some like lag dependent glitches that don't work,
Yeah.
but they all have workarounds. And ultimately, if you're just interested in getting the lower time, you should just be playing on the Wii U. But because it has a significant input delay that is like
Mm.
in part due to the Wii U's emulator itself, like you cannot just play on a CRT and get rid of all of it, you know?
No, yeah. There's definitely
Um,
at least one in SMB1, I think, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm sure to some of the other
one
consoles it can.
frame?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Oh, I'm talking like 100 milliseconds.
Oh, it's that much worse, huh?
Yes, it's
Oh,
really bad.
well, that must, as I was gonna say, that must be a Nintendo 64 thing because the NES, it's not too bad. It
Oh, okay.
exists. It's just not
Like
too
the
bad.
emulator is not that bad, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
there's
I
only
think
like
it
one
must
frame.
be. I think it's different for each game
Hmm.
depending on the
Or at least
emulation,
each
but
system they're emulating.
maybe. Although, yeah, I'd have to look up like what happened for
Yeah.
OT and whatnot, but
Some of them are weird too
yeah.
because I know Mario 3 you can't do the wrong warp and it's not just because like the way the game is programmed has it send you somewhere else. Like when you do the pipe clip, it doesn't work
Mm,
the same way. I don't know. Wii VC is weird.
yeah.
So
Well, actually, there are some Wii U VC exclusive glitches, like
really,
things
okay.
that would crash on N64 don't crash on Wii U.
Oh, interesting.
One of those is like a wrong warp of sorts to what we call like Isles Trophenscoff. Now, like DK Isles is the overworld. It doesn't have a Trophenscoff area. That's like it's like the room that leads to the boss of each level.
Hmm.
But you can manipulate one of the other glitches. I think it's intra-story glitch to send you to like a Trophenscoff room with DK Isles as like the parent map,
Hmm.
which shouldn't be a thing.
No.
And it actually is the case that if you enter the boss of DK Isles, it takes you to K. Rool. So it's like a theoretical, not so theoretical, K. Rool early,
Hmm.
but there is no good way of actually like setting it up such that it's faster than unlocking K. Rool like the normal way. And quote unquote
Huh.
normal way, even though it's already a very glitch heavy way, but
Hmm.
the let's say the existing way that you would do in a speedrun.
That's
Um,
fascinating.
yeah, it's kind of wild that that even exists. Um, so yeah, like maybe one day Wii U will be able to leverage K. Rool early and actually like get a completely different 80% route than the N64, but
Yeah.
um,
And I
doesn't
assume
seem
the
likely yet.
speedrun.com it separates N64 and VC leaderboards.
Yeah, it took a lot of convincing.
Yeah.
Not a lot of convincing, but like a lot of time. When Wii U first came out, the community consensus was to put it on the same board.
Hmm.
Um, but now that like we're removed a few years from that, and we've sort of seen the natural inclination of multiple N64 top level runners wanting to stick on N64 because it feels better to play. Um, we re-separated it, and I'm happy with that.
Hmm. I don't know
So
if this is a hot take, but my take
yeah.
is if the Wii VC version makes just because it's like the Wii VC and how they made the emulation, if it makes that run faster than the Nintendo like 64 version, then the leaderboard should be separated. Like Mario 64 does
Oh,
that.
like any console differences, yeah. Especially ones that are
Any
like not
difference that makes
really
it
small.
advantageous over the
Yeah.
other version. Like in Mario 1 for example, it's slower because the frame rate's different and the game like
Hmm.
doesn't lag, so it doesn't even
Yeah,
matter.
yeah.
So there it isn't separated, but I don't know.
True. Yeah,
That might be a hot
I
take, but I don't
no, it's not. It
know.
doesn't sound like a hot take to me. Like I kind of agree that, like even for like multiple non-emulated releases, like in Portal 2, for example, like I actually started that game on Xbox 360, not on PC.
All right.
And ended up getting it on PC because I wanted to use the map creating tools
Mhm.
that didn't exist in game yet. It was like a separate thing you had to download. But okay, that's a whole other story. Um, but then I realized that PC is a lot faster than Xbox. Um, but yeah, technically, like the Xbox version of that game is like dead. Like no one runs it. But they could if they cared about their own leaderboard. It's
Yeah.
just there's not that many people that care. They just want to all run on PC. In that case, it's not just that PC is a lot faster, it's also a lot like nicer feeling to play on, so I
Mhm.
get it. But in the case of DK64, Wii U is faster, but not as nice, not as enjoyable
Mhm.
of a control. And it's not just the input delay, but it's also it has like bad dead zone mapping. So
Oh,
like
really? Okay.
fine control is difficult.
Mm.
Like the joystick is just not as like even though as bad as like N64 controller joysticks can be, um, it's still harder to like move correctly in Wii U. I don't have like a
Oh,
lot of
Wii U.
first-hand experience because I've only played it like a few minutes at a time at GDQs and stuff when
Mhm.
other runners brought their console. Um, but I've just seen like watching the Wii U runners do their stuff that like they very clearly cannot like tiptoe their character if they want to. Like they have to like flick the stick very short period of time to like try to do any kind of small adjustment instead of just
Hmm.
being able to like, you know, hold it slightly. And they also sometimes, depending on what controller adapter you use, cannot walk in a straight line, which is really bad when you have a lot of out of bounds sections where like you can't see anything. Like you have to clip a wall and your setup to get to the next place is like go at this angle and then walk in that line. And it's like, oh, it just doesn't work. Like I try to hold up on the control stick and like my character is like tilting either to the left or the right and I can barely tell that it's happening
Like
if you're in
even
a
on a
void.
notched controller?
They don't have notched controllers on the Wii U Pro controller,
Oh,
right? So
really?
that might be part of the
I'm
problem.
thinking of like the Wii classic controller, which
You
I
might be
think does
thinking of
have
a
a
Wii one.
yeah.
So you'd have to ask like the runners that actually use this equipment,
I
but
see.
whether you use a Pro controller versus the gamepad versus an N64 controller through a adapter, you might get different results
Hmm.
with all this stuff. Um, but ultimately, the reason that I play on N64 is I always played on N64 anyway. Like I have been doing it since before the Wii U existed. I didn't really have any reason to want to get the Wii U for any other like games that it may have had. Um, and then like when it did come out, I looked at people's responses to it, and they were like, "Yeah, it's like it's clunky. It has
Hmm.
bad input delay." And I'm like, "Well, that's a good enough reason for me not to go and do it." Um, for me, the like inherent value of speedrunning is less about the time that you get, like in its pure like numerical form, and more about how happy you are with your gameplay
Hmm.
and like whether you feel like you put together a clean run or an impressive run or you pulled off all the tricks that you wanted. I don't know. Um, so it never really bothered me to be playing on a not fastest version. And I guess a lot of other people feel that way because we still have people playing on N64.
Hmm. No, yeah, I think that makes sense. Like it would suck at a top level to force yourself onto a version of the game that's just worse to play.
Yeah. And
Especially
like
when it's like
maybe it
not
doesn't bother people as
official,
much
or at least like
depending.
an emulated version.
Yeah, it is an official version, so like we have to include it.
Yeah,
At
of
least
course.
people feel like they should
But
include it.
it is an emulated
Yeah.
version.
Yeah. And there's some runners, not most, but some that say like, oh, they can't stand the lag
Hmm.
of the N64 version. And I guess this is more of a thing if like you didn't grow up with it and like you had like maybe if you played the emulator version first and then you played it on console and you're like, ugh, this is so sluggish and like annoying. So like you might find it preferable to deal with the delay and controller quirkiness of the emulated version, just to not have to worry about like the frame rate dropping.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like that there exists some lag because now it's another layer of skill to see how much you can reduce the lag.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
use
Mario 64
camera
has
angles that
yeah.
that keep it to a minimum and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a whole skill around lag minimization as well. That
Lag minimization, yeah,
yeah.
exactly, which doesn't exist on the other version.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. This game sounds like pick your poison, I guess. Either game lag or input lag. What do you
Yeah.
prefer? So.
Well, the nice thing about the game lag is that the game has a built-in lag compensation
Mm-hmm.
speed factor, which means like for every lag frame that occurs, you get a certain multiplier applied to your horizontal velocity. So the intent is that your character is moving real time the same speed or close to the same speed that it would be if it was not lagging. But it also has side effects of like if you want to jump a gap in a laggy area, you can potentially jump like 2 to 3 times as far as how far a jump would go in a lagless setting. And there's actually a couple of places where like Wii U can like almost like just barely make a jump across a gap, but it's like super free on N64 because of the ambient lag.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's like lag abuse tricks where you intentionally spike the lag to use that speed boost to temporarily like speed up so much that you clip through a wall.
Yeah.
But those are not as prevalent as they used to be because uh, we found phase walking basically, which phase walking is like uh, it takes advantage of some kind of angle overflow thing that happens when you go into first person, and every there's like a maybe close to 90-degree range within the 360-degree circle that it works in like globally. So like any area of the game, if you're facing in that certain direction, more or less, you can set up a phase glitch and you can go through any wall in that direction
Mm-hmm.
of the map. So that's really busted, and it kind of made it so that you don't need to use as many other other types of tricks that could otherwise get you out of bounds, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And helpful, I guess, for speed improvement.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a double-edged sword though, because it's very difficult to perform
Mm-hmm.
consistently. Because you have to, like, the only way that it realistically works for like a human hand to perform is you have to like hold slightly down on the joystick on one frame and then like very much up on the next frame and then release it right after that. So
Mm.
you have to do this like weird, and then you have to press other buttons while you're at it. But basically, the thumb has this like weird kind of like press and flick really quickly, and so it can be kind of like tiring to try them over and over again. And the inputs are like precise enough that you can't just get it first try every time. So it's like, but they save so much time that you have to go for them at the top level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd say like the best of days, I might get like an average of 2 to 3 attempts per success. And on my worst days, it might be like 5 to 10 tries per success.
Yeah.
So those add up.
Yeah, that does sound complicated. Reminds me of frame walking, although that's like alternating
It's
neutral and
similar.
yeah, neutral
It
and full
actually,
direction every frame.
it's funny you mentioned frame walking because that was how it was first discovered
Oh, okay.
in terms of like when they tasked the inputs. They first discovered that like coming out of first person, if you alternate neutral and full up every frame, like using a task tool,
Mm-hmm.
then you would get through the wall. But it took like at least like 10 plus or 20 plus frames to get enough speed to make it through the wall like that. So
Mm.
like there was no way you were ever gonna like flick the joystick up like in a row, like 10 times in
I
like
mean, I've done
half a
that,
second
so I don't know.
on a joystick.
Yeah, I have.
Maybe the frame walking on on SM64 is. Do you still have to do it like every other frame,
I
or do you have more
there
leeway?
might be leeway actually. I don't know the exact technical like. I
Oh,
just know
okay.
like the default explanation is it's every frame, but I think that's like not exactly true. I don't know.
It's the same kind
I'm
of
not an
like not
expert.
exactly true thing in
Yeah.
DK64. It's more technically, it's like the magnitude range of the joystick has to change every frame.
Hmm.
So it doesn't have to be perfectly still and perfectly up. It could be like anywhere within like a range of dead center,
I
and
see.
then anywhere like beyond a certain magnitude the next frame. That
Okay.
kind of thing. And it has to keep changing magnitude every frame.
Hmm.
But yeah, the way to perform it with the fewest possible like changes is slightly down and then fully up
Hmm.
in those magnitude ranges.
Got it.
And then you have to let go
Hmm.
on the next one. So it's like three joystick ranges, 3 frames in a row, and then you have to like crouch to maintain your speed because when you crouch in the game, you like have a slower deceleration, so
Hmm.
you'll keep the the speed that you got. And the reason you want to hold down at the start is because it's like a quick excel. It's kind of like fast excel actually.
Okay.
It's like if you're instead of like if you're facing backwards, you accelerate quicker. It's like if you were just moving backwards and then you move forward, you accelerate quicker than if you move forward from a standstill
Wow.
for whatever
It is
reason.
very
It's
similar.
very similar. Yeah.
That's funny. Wow. TK64 is just 3D Mario 1.
Yeah. We
Except
steal a
not at
lot of
all.
trick names from other games actually.
I
Like we
mean,
have
that's true.
ISG,
Hmm.
which is Infinite Sword Glitch in OOT, but it's intra-story glitch in our
Ah,
game.
I see.
Um, what else do we have that we stole? Don't remember. That's like the big one. But yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love how messed up that game is. I remember it was a few years ago. I think I was in a call with Cosmic and Bismuth, and I just booted up the
Mm-hmm.
game because I had like just gotten a new console, and I was trying out the uh, what do they call it? You need it to play the game, the like expansion port
The
thing,
expansion pack.
expansion pack.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. It doesn't work without it on the
Yeah, so
N64.
I was just making sure, like I just got an EverDrive. I was making sure like my expansion pack was working and everything. So I was playing the game, and they like were just telling me how easy it was to do these things, and within
Yeah,
like 20 minutes, I was like halfway through the game, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was like,
it is
oh,
so much fun to go to events and just like explain people how to do glitches in your game when they're like so easy to just do with like simple instructions.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, I think that's a big part of why so many people get into running DK64 is that a lot of the glitches are fairly straightforward with like relatively basic instruction on how to perform them.
mm-hmm,
And it's not like a hard game to beat casually either. I mean, it's long. It's got like if you're gonna beat it casually, it will take a lot of hours just because
especially if you want a one
it's
percent.
a big game and
Yeah.
you if especially if you want to 1%. But like even if you don't, the any percent glitch list for reference is like uh 3 hours and a half, something like that.
Mm.
It's
And
like
that's the
longer
speed
than
run. Yeah.
yeah, that's a speed run.
Mm-hmm.
I would say a casual first time playthrough might be like 10 hours if you're good, like if you're proficient at games already, not like a little kid playing it for the first time,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, plenty of content. Bang for your buck, I guess. So that's good.
that's true. Yeah, for sure.
All right. This is just something I'm curious about because you were definitely running the game when this was discovered, but you know the hidden collectible for years that
The
someone
rainbow
like found.
coin?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it.
Yeah, that's wild, isn't it? So
Yeah.
one day Isotarge was like playing around in his emulator tools. Um, was it Isotarge? I think it was Isotarge. I hope I'm not wrong about that. And he was like using some kind of memory tool to like scan all the different objects in each level just to like document them,
Hmm.
I guess. And then he was going through all the objects in Fungi Forest and eventually came across the dirt patch hidden in the grass, and he was like, "Wait, this is here? Like, who knows about this?" Like, turns out like none of us knew about it, and yeah, people. There's like a poorly, circulated rumor or myth or whatever that it like invalidated the 101% speedrun. No, it never did. Like those coins are not part of the game percentage. So
I was gonna ask.
the biggest impact it had was we had to rebalance our rainbow coin goals in bingo because
I
there was
see.
one new rainbow coin in a very easy to access location now. So anything that was like a coin based goal was like easier than it should have been.
That's really funny. I can't believe they put. Do they mean to put that there, or they're just like, no one will ever find this?
Well, I mean, you'd have to ask a developer to know
Yeah,
for
I
sure, but I
guess.
think they probably put it there and then they put the grass there later, not realizing that they cover it up.
Hmm.
Maybe they noticed and thought, well, this isn't an
Lamau.
important this isn't an important item anyway, and it would be a fun Easter egg if someone ever notices it, because it is like technically possible that you could be like really perceptive and notice because your Kong does like move up a little bit when it walks onto the mound. So if you're
I
really
see.
perceptive, you will see that like you're less deep in the grass when you walk over it. But it's in a part of the level where there's like not much going on. You don't have much of a reason to be over there other than there's like one tag barrel nearby. Um, and I wouldn't be surprised if like some people have found it casually playing the game, but not. It was never
It was,
documented.
yeah, never documented.
Yeah.
That's so interesting though. I love like new things being found like 2 decades
Yeah.
later or whatever.
Yeah, it's really strange. And an inbounds too, right? Because it wasn't out of the
Hmm.
like it wasn't unheard of that like collectibles sitting out of bounds have been found. There are a few of those like misplaced out of bounds items in DK64 as well. There's a couple of like DK and Diddy bananas that are sitting under a floor somewhere. There's a couple like chunky coins and Gloomy Galleon that are just below the floor. That like they look like they probably were placed in a spot that was intended to be in bounds originally, but then they may have redesigned the shape of the geometry of the level and it got shifted out of bounds. So
Hmm.
yeah, who knows?
Oh well.
All sorts of weird misaligned things
Yeah,
in old games that are manually stitched together.
it happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, super funny that yeah, it was just sitting there all this time, ripe for the
Mm-hmm.
taking.
Yeah.
Was there like
Solid.
a all
5
rainbow
coins for every coin.
coins category extension that was
Oh yeah.
impacted? Yeah.
So we have something that we call the memer boards,
Mm.
which is like a fully comprehensive list of any category you might consider to run in the game. It's like every single bonus barrel is its own category. Every mini
Mm.
game is its own category. Every golden banana in the game from a new file is its own category. So
Mm.
your goal could just be start a file and get that one golden banana. How
All right.
quickly can you do it? Um, there's like uh, time attack for like each boss fight, um, and each phase of K. Rool. And one of them is like all rainbow coins. Another one is all collectibles, which is like a longer version of 101, where you get everything in 101, but you also get all of the less important permanent collectibles in the game.
Waiter, more
Um,
collectibles, please.
and I've never actually ran that category because it's a lot of extra fluff to add on top already on top of what's already a very long run.
It's a good thing you
Um,
didn't because it would have been
it would have
made
been
obsolete
voided.
with the
Yes, that's
discovery of
right.
this coin.
Yeah, so there's like not many people who have done runs of those categories. But like Connor 75 is one of those guys who's tried it out. So he had to redo his run after we found the coin. But it
Unfortunate.
wasn't like in a main category
Yeah,
and
no, no.
not like a hotly contested thing.
Yeah, it's good it
But
didn't
yeah,
affect anything
very fun.
important. But
I mean, might be important to him. I'm not sure.
I guess important to
uh,
the overall speed running of the game. So
yeah, yeah. It didn't like invalidate like a ton of runners' times
yeah,
or
that
anything.
would that would have
But yeah, the
been
Memer boards is
unfortunate.
a funny project. I think Bismuth may have been the first person to put it together. It's like basically a big Google spreadsheet of all of the different ways that you could think of splicing up or coming up with random categories for like every different type of collectible and everything. Could take a look at some other examples just for like silly things that we have in here because there's a whole miscellaneous section too.
I have to assume there's like hundreds of categories with how the game is.
Yes, there are. Reverse key order.
Mm,
That's a wild one.
yeah.
You have to collect the boss keys in reverse order, and there's like very specific niche glitches that are required to even route that properly. One-handed. No levels early, no lanky. So you're not allowed to use Lanky Kong, but you could still get it done. F key RTA. That's probably the one of the memeiest categories on here. There's a like a child's piano toy in the factory
Okay.
level, and it has like notes like A through F on it, and it's one of those like memory games where you have to follow along with the pattern, and it's not randomized, but the pattern that comes in the game never uses the F key. So this category is you go to the piano and you play the F key.
So you press F to pay respects as fast as possible. I see,
Yes,
I see.
exactly.
Okay.
There's a category called Go Home and Die,
Oh,
which
great.
is you have to die inside of DK's treehouse, and it's only a minute and a half long.
Finally, a category for me.
All melon crates. That's a good one. The Tale of the Phantom Banana. Okay, that's probably one of the funniest categories that exists. It's over 3 hours long, apparently. Um, the Tale of the Phantom Banana. That's really funny. So, what that category is it's a glitchless category where you have to collect an invisible banana with Tiny Kong. And how can that be possible, right? Um, when you unlock a Kong in the Creepy Castle boss fight, which is like the second last level of the game, um, you can that boss fight works in the sense that it assumes you would have already had all the 5 Kongs unlocked by then, and you like go through them in a specific order. And if you fall out of the arena, it'll just send you to the next Kong. It's kind of like your lives for that boss fight. And if you run out of all your Kongs, you lose the fight. But as a side effect of that, we take advantage of it in speedruns and exit the fight with the Kong that we don't have unlocked yet. And then you can play as that Kong, even though you never freed them from their cage, right? And in that interim period, before you like unlock them permanently, all of their collectibles are invisible, but you can still pick them up. So that's how the Phantom Banana part works. In like the 101% speedrun, like 15 minutes into the run, we spend some time entering the castle boss fight over and over to unlock different Kongs. And the way you permanently unlock them is you just jump in a tag barrel, and then you have them for good. But the Tale of the Phantom Banana is a category where you expressly have to play the game glitchless up until Creepy Castle and unlock Tiny from that fight and collect the Phantom Banana without using any things. It's basically exposing the fact that if you're very careful about your routing, it is possible to advance, like to advance far enough in the game without ever having unlocked Tiny Kong, even though you're like intended to unlock her in the second level.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Very, very memey for sure.
very memey. Yeah, I never committed 3 hours to doing that one, but it's out there. Maybe I'll do it one day.
Plenty of options.
Yeah, but
Well,
yeah, the Meme Boards is like the end game of running this game probably. Like if I'm like still interested in speedrunning when I'm 60 years old, and I'm just like, and somehow my console hasn't died by then, and I'm done with all the main categories. I just go through and be records. I don't know.
well, It'll always be there,
Who
I
knows?
guess.
Yeah. Do you ever worry not worry, do you ever wonder about how long people are going to keep speedrunning these old games? 'Cause you play an even older game than I do.
Oh, it'll never die.
I like to
That's
think
what I've
that,
learned.
at least.
Not at this point. Like,
Yeah.
nah. Games have been dead thousands of times, and they're still not dead. So, I mean, it ain't happening.
Yeah. As long as the equipment to play them still works, I think there'll be people interested in doing it.
And
Yeah.
I think especially nowadays, there's so much interest in retro stuff that people will find a way to keep them alive forever anyway. So,
Yeah.
probably never
Or
truly be dead.
at least for like an entire lifetime, like for the generation of people that could have potentially
Hmm.
either played the game or had like a parent play the game when they were little.
Yeah, or
You
they
know.
could make a device that just like perfectly emulates it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
There could be like a all-purpose emulator or deluxe thing that like perfectly recreates uh, old console
I think the
behavior and whatnot.
Mister is kind of like that. I don't know for how many different cores, but I know like the NES one is like 1-to-1 because people have speedran on it. So they're
Yeah,
already kind of there. Hardware emulation, I guess.
yeah, it's nice that like SMB1 emulation is like frame perfect to the
Yeah,
console
NES
at this
is
point. NES,
just
oh, all
perfect.
NES games.
I'm pretty sure.
Wow, that's
If you
nice.
use the right emulator, at least like Nestopia, for example, is like perfect. FCUX has a small like complication with how it handles lag frames, I think, but yeah,
Oh, okay,
Nestopia is like perfect. So
very good.
I know
Yeah, and
SNES can be
N64 is not
weird.
quite there yet.
Nintendo 64, yikes.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think each game has its own like quirks in terms of how the
Hmm.
developers of the game utilize the hardware. So like you need like either different emulator settings for different games or something weird like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a lot of trial and error and yeah, it's crazy. Oh, I just remembered there's kind of a big thing going on in DK64 that I didn't talk about and I have to talk about.
Oh, okay.
The randomizer.
Mm.
We got into that. That's another thing that we borrowed from OT. But yeah, we actually have a pretty dedicated randomizer development team and player base. I actually am blown away at how many more people are interested in playing DK64 uh, than we ever had seen before when it was just speedrunning the vanilla game. Now that there's a randomizer, the audience for like people running that and actually participating in like randomizer tournaments is like 3 to 5 times as big as the actual speedrunners who are playing the vanilla game, which is like
Hmm.
who knew, right? That like that kind of thing was
Yeah,
out there,
I knew the
and
randomizer kind of popped off. So
yeah, it's incredible. I quite enjoy it a lot, and it's just another reason I'll probably be playing this game for years to come. But uh, yeah, it's got so many great features. Like obviously, every collectible in the game is like subject to be randomized in a big item pool. Um, there's a hint system now where like Wrinkly Kong's doors will tell you things about your seed. So like an item in Creepy Castle is on the path to key 5 or something. So it's like gives you a push in the right direction without completely spoiling it. And there's so many different options for your settings, like what you want to randomize, um, that can influence like the average length of your seed or how difficult it will be. Um, yeah, so anybody who ends up watching this is like curious about this, go to dk64randomizer.com. Uh, you'll if you like the game even a little bit casually, you'll probably really like the randomizer because it
yeah.
has a lot of quality of life improvements that are just like, oh, this one little quirk of the vanilla game is annoying, so we fixed it. you know, like built in, it has tag anywhere, so you can just change your Kong with the click of a button on the D-pad. Um,
Mm.
you don't need to use tag barrels. Yeah, there's an incredible amount of like ROM hacking and like talent for game mods and stuff these days that was not there at all when I started running the games.
Yeah. So you've been running DK64 for over a decade.
True.
Like, I'll say
Yeah.
nonstop, not in the obviously there were breaks, but like there has been a little bit throughout this entire period of time.
At least a little bit each year.
Hmm. And so you've had the record in any percent and 101% multiple times throughout the
Yeah.
history of the game. And I know you currently.
Currently, I have the N64 101% record and any percent record, and
Those are the big ones.
I have second place on the no levels early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good. And by that I
Yeah.
mean literally as good as it can be.
I I think my any percent runs should be beaten soon by Adam Whitmore, if I had to guess.
Mm.
Um, he's been like within 10 seconds of it for a while now, and it's improvable by like 5 to 10 seconds if you get a really clean run. It's one of those categories that's like got more frustrating tricks and luck dependent stuff. And even though it's short, it's like hard to get a good run going. A lot of things have to go your way.
Yeah.
Um, and like I only got the record by 1 second this time
Mm.
around. Uh, so kind of felt fortunate to
That's all you need.
pull that off. Yeah, it's all you need for it to be a record, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I had a very lucky Mad Jack fight, which has random switch spawns,
Mhm.
and it's like the best you can do is manipulate it to give you like a 50% chance of a good location for your next switch. So, and there are 5 switches, so it's like perfect fight would be a little bit like worse than 1 in 32
Yeah.
chance, and I got 4 out of 5 good or perfect, I should say. Like 4 out of 5 were in a perfect spot, and the 5th one was like an extra 3 to 5 seconds away. So
Wow.
not bad at all. Like definitely one of the best Mad Jack fights I've ever had. But because of the phase walking stuff I was talking about earlier, like
Mhm.
there's another couple of seconds to save by like if you could theoretically hit all the phase walks first try, there's another 5 to 10 seconds to save. Um,
Wow.
and then there's like 3 seconds to save in the final boss, maybe a little bit more. Um, but yeah, it's hard.
Certainly not a ton of seconds.
Not a ton of seconds, but there are people who can do it. Like
Mhm.
it's not like I have
Oh, of course.
no record stands forever. Um,
Never.
and certainly not this one.
Unless it's perfect.
Unless it's like yeah, very
Mhm.
niche cases of games that are so perfectly solved. Um, but this is not one of those. Yeah. And then in terms of 101%, that's the one I'm most actively working on. So I just got this 5 hour 24-minute run a couple weeks back, and that's really nice for me. Like I had a 527, yeah, before that, and the record was also 527 by Zerulda. So I lowered it by almost 3 minutes. And this is the thing where that rabbit race skip just kept killing all my runs that were on pace for like the last 4 months
Mhm.
that I had been trying. So I finally like got a run where I didn't die there.
That's good.
Um, but there was one of those runs that died that was like on pace for like a minute faster than
Mm.
what I just got. So I have that as a goal to save that minute at least.
Mhm.
Um, but at least now that I have the record, I'm not like as unhappy with my spot in the category.
Mhm. And we were
Um,
gonna bring this up earlier, but you were saying the task is like an hour and a half faster than
yeah,
the world
the,
record.
yeah, mainly because the task can do a lot of spawn snags and tag barrel storage nonsense that is just there's no way it would ever be RTA viable.
Mm.
A lot of glitches are like you have to be able to like navigate blind or just like pull off a series of frame perfect, position perfect type stuff to save time. And then it also uses like phase walks everywhere that it can. Not just like where in the RTA we'll probably say I'd probably say my cutoff right now for like whether or not I should use a phase walk is like it has to save at least 5 seconds. If it doesn't save at least 5 seconds, it's probably not worth doing. Maybe on a good day, if it saves 3 seconds and I'm hitting them really well, I might try it. But the task will do anything that saves any time. So
Yeah, of course.
it's got like hundreds of them, and those add up. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of other things that the task does that don't look RTA viable at all. When we watch these new tasks as they come out, I do have like an eye for like what can I use here? Did they do anything that I can replicate? And there was one like GB early trick that I was like, oh, maybe I can do that one. And then I like spent like 2 hours trying to do it once on a practice ROM, and I finally like got a simplified, slower version of it, and it was really hard and took like an hour of like just trying that one trick over and over. I'm like, okay, well, I gave it
We'll
my
save that
best.
for
I don't think
later.
I'll. Yeah, I'm not coming back to use that one in runs anytime soon. Maybe not ever. Not with the current way that I attempted it. It just was not reliable at all.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy that the task is that much faster. You
Yeah.
rarely see that level of like
Yeah, it's
time
wild.
difference between the two.
I think in general DK64 is a game that has a lot of potential in terms of like being able to do stuff quickly because there's not a lot of downtime even though the run is so long. It's like the run is 5.5 hours. There's not that many cutscenes. And like the longest like cutscene that I have to even take a bathroom break is like an artificially created one where we turn in the boss keys to K Lumsey. We turn in like 4 or 5 of them in a row, and you can use the like RL start on a controller to neutral reset the joystick, so you can walk away and have your Kong like moving in a certain direction. So I just have it set up so that like in between the cutscenes, he just walks back into the cutscene trigger every time, and I can step away for a minute, use the restroom. And fortunately, that's like roughly halfway into the run, so it works out really well.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope I don't ever find a reroute that cuts all that out and then have to do the whole run without a break. But yeah, it might happen at some point. Um, it's convenient that that also happens to be the fastest route that I can think of right now for the game. So yeah,
Just don't go
uh,
searching for anything different.
and we do anyway. I actually
Yeah.
spend a lot of time looking for route improvements in this game. I think that maybe gives me an edge in 101 running because I maybe more than most runners like spend a lot of time looking for route improvements or timing route improvement ideas. Um, so even like when looking for alternatives, I've just had to spend a lot of time going through the movement of different sections in order to time it to compare it to the existing movement, and that kind of in turn works as practice for those sections. So even before they're like implemented into the run, I've already had my go at them, which I'm sure benefits me in some way.
Can't hurt.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and like someone's got to work on a route, and I'm not the only one. Like there's a lot of people with good ideas for
yeah,
routes, and like I said, I don't generally find a whole lot of the glitches, but I try to make them as consistent as I can.
yeah, makes sense. Well, uh, are there any other games you've run that are significant enough to talk about a little bit?
Well, I ran Portal 1
Yeah.
around the same time as Portal 2, or like a little after, like after I dipped my toes enough into Portal 2, and I was discovering the community for the game. There's a lot of people who also ran Portal 1, so I was like, oh, that looks like a fun short game to try. And so I've done like any percent in that game in, crap, what was my time again? I want to say it was like 10 or 11 minutes, but it's been so many years, I don't even really remember how long that category was at the time that I was running it. I never had any records in that game,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like the physics in Portal 1 are kind of like janky compared to Portal 2, so it was always like a little uncomfortable for me to try to like go fast and not be bothered by them. Um, but yeah, maybe it's just because it's not the game that I started with. But it's a fun game and it has a lot of out of bounds. It has a lot more out of bounds than Portal 2, actually. Portal 2 barely has any at all. It's kind of funny how different the game engines are between them, considering they're in the same series.
Yeah.
But like Portal 1, from a game engine and glitch perspective, is a lot closer to like the Half-Life 2 engine, if you've ever seen runs of that.
Yeah.
Where it has like the backwards accelerated hopping, and Portal 2 has the bunny hopping, strafing forward movement, which is a lot more satisfying to me than the backward hopping. Although they're both cool in their own right.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that game. I mentioned Burnout, right?
You did a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like other than DK64, Burnout is probably the next most recent game that I've done speedruns for. And I do hold like most of the individual lap and track records, but only for lack of community. I'm just kind of waiting for more people to show up and hopefully find interest in the game. But it was never a particularly popular game, and it's from like 2001, so like there's not a lot of eyes on it.
Yeah.
I have it for GameCube or the GameCube disc, but it's running on a Wii now. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I couldn't even find a full game run of it when I decided to give it a try. So I had the record by default when I started it.
Easy.
Yeah, it's funny. Two of the games I've run are like this. Like Portal 2 was like this for me, but that's because I got started early. And then Burnout, just there was not an established leaderboard for it.
It's funny hearing
there
that with how
was
popular
on-
Portal 2 is and being like, yeah, I got the record by default because no one was running it yet.
Okay, I technically didn't like. I don't think I was technically the first person to do a single
Yeah.
segment run, but it was close enough to the beginning
Yeah.
of the activity. Yeah. That it wasn't particularly notable, the runs that came before. They may have been like under 2 hours, just barely, and then like within like a week of doing attempts, I had like a 120 something. So I don't know. Like there was just a lot of skips that had been found that no one implemented yet. Anyway, yeah, Burnout's a game that I enjoy. The only thing that's weird about Burnout is like I'm so used to running glitch heavy games, and I can't find anything yet in that game. So like it's just I have to race well. It's just a racing game. It feels totally different. It has traffic, so I have to like try to dodge the traffic and not crash. It has a boost mechanic, so I have to try to maximize how much I get of that, try to put it to its full potential. And so I enjoy the kind of risk reward aspect of, do I try to use boost here even though it's like a heavy traffic section, or do I save it until I'm on a straightaway so that I am less likely to crash and just use the boost on an area that's like safer to go that fast. So it's fun, and more people should try it if you like racing games. So yeah, and then the other game that I ran a little tiny bit is Simpsons Hit and Run, which is another driving game for the GameCube, but it's more of a GTA style.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
game.
the Grand Theft Auto Simpsons game, right?
It's like a Grand Theft Auto type Simpsons game where it's a lot of driving missions, but you can get out on foot and have some like platforming type stuff as well. And yeah, it's another one of those games that I played as a kid on GameCube, and I think one year someone was making there some kind of like social media post was going around called the 12-hour challenge. I don't know
Oh
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
were around for this, but
Oh, I
yeah,
participated in
you
a few
remember
of them
that?
myself. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this was like the only one that I ever actually took seriously. So I participated in a 12-hour challenge to try to learn Simpsons Hit and Run, and I was just learning the all story missions category, which is like uh, it's kind of like the no levels early slash any percent. No, it's not any percent. No, because technically then it would just be called any percent. I don't know, but it's basically you do all of the story missions to get to the end of the game without having to collect everything in the game. And I'm not sure. I guess there must have been some other kind of weird any percent, maybe new game plus stuff that was considered faster for any percent, but that wasn't part of this. So um, it was like the beginner friendly category to try. The only thing is that I had it on Wii or GameCube disc, and the fastest version is the PC version, like
Mm.
most games that have PC versions. So my run is a lot slower because it has slower loads and yeah, whatever. But that's the version that I ran because it's the version I had, and it was fun.
Cool.
I didn't really stick with it for that long though.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, some games are just like, oh, that was fun for a little bit, and then you have
Yeah,
your like, yeah, this is my life for the past 10 years. So
yeah,
it'd
yeah.
be
It's
like that.
interesting.
Everyone's got their own thing. I've
Hmm.
definitely had my like, I did this for a weekend, and that's about all I got
Yeah,
to say about it. So, but it's still
yeah.
cool.
I'm trying to remember if there's any other game that I ran for like even less time than Simpsons. Uh, or that might be the game that I've run. Well, okay, I should mention Banjo Tooie
Mm.
because although I've never, no, I have done actual runs of Banjo Tooie on the leaderboard. Right. Okay. Yeah. So Banjo Tooie is like the brother of DK64 in my mind. Um, we have like our trifecta of Banjo Kazooie, DK64, Banjo Tooie, Rareware games that all came out around the same time, same developer group, Rare, and uh, same composer for all three games. They're all 3D adventure, open world type style games, right? BK is more of a platformer than the others, but you know they each kind of each lean into their own thing. Um, and growing up, I also played and enjoyed Banjo Tooie a lot alongside DK64, and you know it's probably the thing. It's like if I didn't have DK64 to run, I'd probably be running Banjo Tooie.
Mm.
It's really good. It's really fun. It's not as glitch heavy as DK, and that's probably the main thing that I am like a little less interested in it. It's slower paced, and it does have a decent amount of tricks that are cool, but not to the same scale as DK64 does. And it's just a little sluggish to get going in the game. It just has more cutscenes, a little bit slower movement, more mini games, um, more downtime in general.
Yeah,
But it actually has a shorter overall 100% category. And in
most
terms
things
of
do.
like, yeah, true. But in terms of like games that I could see myself running in the future that I haven't, like that I've sort of dabbled in a little bit, but I haven't fully explored, Tui is the next one on my list. Like I think at some point it would be fun to do that game's 100% category and that game's they have a middle category as well called no DCW, which is like the old any percent before they found a way of wrong warping to the final boss.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All these games have got to warp to the final boss, I guess.
Yeah, except for DK, but I kind of like it that way. Oh, actually, that makes me think of a question for you. What do you think about games where you warp past the final boss into the end credits? Does that feel like completing the game to you?
Well, I guess the overall definition of completing a game is seeing the credits. So by that definition, yes.
Yeah, I
Um,
never really thought that
it's
that
category
definition
dependent.
made sense to me. I do
Yeah.
think it's like a gray area and
Mhm.
that it depends on the nature of the game, but
Yeah. Like
Like
OOT
I
has their wrong warp to the credits, but they still have their defeat Ganon, right? So I mean, they're still.
Yeah, to me, like the defeat Ganon route feels more like an actual beating the game route. And the
Mhm.
warping to the credits is like, oh, that's interesting that you can do that, but I wouldn't call it like a speed run of beating the game. Like, or it's like its
Yeah,
own weird thing. Like,
I guess
but
I
I
would
am,
consider it, but there should always be like a category where you actually beat the game,
yeah,
not I guess traditionally, but like you finish the game the way the game is like, yes, this is finishing the game.
yeah. And I know it's kind of like weird to say that when we already use like a bunch of glitches to get to the final boss early.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's still like there's layers to it. Like people who will watch glitched runs and think, oh, this isn't really beating the game because you're using glitches, you know.
Yeah, it's
But
the same
then
kind of mindset.
even like me who uses glitches a lot and love them, will see a run that like warps to the credits and feel like, oh, you're not really beating the game technically in my eyes, but
Yeah.
it's
Like I've
still
run
valid. Like it's
Mario
still an
3 any
interesting thing.
percent, which is just doing arbitrary code execution to load the ending sequence.
Oh
And
yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's any percent to me, but then they have any
yeah,
percent no wrong warp, which yes, I'm glad that exists because that's a more traditional
yeah,
way.
yeah. The way I see it is like I think enough people still find the act of like getting to the end of the game interesting enough that generally speaking, whenever those wrong warp things are found, there ends up being an alternate category that doesn't use
Hmm.
it. So yeah,
Yeah,
which I
and
think
that
is the right
way,
way of
yeah,
handling it. Yeah.
because that way you keep the like world record history a little more stabilized because obviously
Hmm.
that would like destroy the any percent progression if you went from like defeating from beating the game to warping to credits. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's
also interesting that in like OOT, the progression was like beating Ganon and then going to credits and then back to beating Ganon and then back to going to credits over the years. Like, because
that
they
is
found like,
interesting.
because like the original Ganon warp or credits warp was like a 50 something minute route, right?
Mm.
40-minute route? I don't remember exactly, but it was
I
like,
don't follow Zelda all too much.
it's like faster than all dungeons, but like not as fast as the Deku to Ganon's collapse route.
Mm, I see.
Yeah. I don't know. That was like a long time ago, even before I started following OOT speedrunning. But yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just
but yeah, back to
interesting. Yeah.
like games that I've ran a little tiny bit. Yeah, so 2E I've run any percent, but I haven't run any of the longer categories. And even the any percent thing was like there was a community tournament that I
Mm.
participated in. And so my PB is just from like doing my tournament matches. Um, the other cool thing that happened in 2E was uh, they organized a challenge series and bingo tournaments also. So I've played a decent amount of bingo in 2E, um, which means like I had to learn a fair amount of the tricks across the game to be able to use them in a bingo route and like come up with my route. But I haven't actually like grinded any of the main categories. And then the challenge series was like a special thing where like each week there would be a surprise challenge that like you go into the race not knowing what it is and the organizers like say okay you have to do this in the game and you have to like route it on the fly and that was really cool and then we ended up making a DK64 challenge series the next year because we were so inspired
Yeah.
that we wanted to do one in DK as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So sounds like most of everything then.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the one type of game like that has there's so many games like this that get speedrun is the side-scrolling 2D games, and I've never speedrun any of them, which is like the Mario classics and
Yeah.
stuff.
Hey,
Um,
everyone's got their
yeah,
taste.
yeah. I don't know. Like it just didn't happen to be the type of games that I uh, played a lot, and I mean I think you may have caught on to the pattern that almost every game that I've run is a game that I first played casually
Hmm.
either as a kid or just when it came out before speedrunning it. Like even with Portal 2, which is the newest released game of the ones that I've ran, I still like played the game casually when it first released, and just really enjoyed it. And like I wouldn't be running the game if that didn't happen. Um, and like even other games that I kind of circled back around to, like Burnout and Subsistent Run, I played them back in the early 2000s when I was a kid. So yeah, I've always had an affinity to want to run games that I enjoyed the game itself as a
Mhm.
casual player first.
Yeah, I'd always recommend playing a game casually before ever deciding to run it.
Same.
So
Yeah, because
I think
it's
that's
just
what I've
like
done.
you have a better understanding of the parts that you're skipping, especially in glitch heavy games. Like I don't understand how someone can like jump into a game that they've never played before and just like start by going through the speedrun route, and it's
Hmm.
like, oh, it says go out of bounds here and get to this thing, and it's like, now what happens if you get there in a run and you like mess up that trick and you have to go the long way, and it's like you've never even gone the long way before. It's like, do you know what you're doing? Do you know how this game works? Do you even know what you're skipping? But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. People do whatever they find the most fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would always recommend like play the game casually at least once over.
Mhm.
Maybe there's like a rare breed of speed game that like the game is actually not fun unless you're speedrunning it. But I don't know which one that would be.
I'm sure they exist.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Um, I do want to touch more on GDQ because you talked about how you've been to a lot of events, but you've been in the events too.
Yeah, a few times, especially like earlier on. I was fortunate enough to get my runs accepted in 2013, 2014, 2015 of the Games Done Quick, of the Awesome Games Done Quicks events. And, throughout those, I had Portal 2 a couple times. I had Portal 1. I did a race with Azare. And I think at that same event, I did a co op run of Portal 2 with him back to back. That was a lot of fun. Um, and then I had DK64 race with Seafox in 2014. 2014, I had 3 events, like 3 runs, which
Wow.
is like unheard of.
And that was like that's one of the events people remember. That was the first to hit a million, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's either that or 15. No, I think it was 2015. That was the first to hit a million
Hmm.
because it was during Bismuth Minecraft run, which I was there
That was
for.
2014.
Was that 2014? Seriously?
Yeah, that was the 2014 setup, I remember.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I got it mixed up. You're right. I got it mixed up. It was 2014. Yeah,
So
that was a very, very fun event. That was the
Bismuth
first
got
one
world
that
record that run.
that was the first time I met Bismuth in person, and he's been like my buddy. We've been going to all these events together since then. Um, like we usually room together, and we like I actually got to visit his house in Montreal at the last No Reset, which was a pleasant time. And yeah, so yeah, AGQ 2013 was like the first time I had gone to any in-person event. I didn't really know anybody very well, so it was just like meeting new faces, right? Getting a feel for the scene. And I had my one Portal 2 run to do there, which I was so unprepared for because I didn't bring my laptop. I didn't like have that ready at the time. So like, I mean, the event has PCs to play on, but I didn't realize like how different it would feel or look. Um, I think I brought my own mouse at least, but they all had mechanical keyboards, and I had been playing on a laptop the whole time with like the flat keys, and I didn't realize like I couldn't like I had no muscle memory for bunny hopping on a mechanical keyboard because like it just the key presses felt too different, and I was like I had to like find someone with like a Mac style plug-in keyboard that had flatter keys so that I could do my run, and that's why there was like technical difficulties to get that run started, which was a mess. But yeah, I was more prepared the next time that I did my Portal 2 runs because I brought my own computer. So yeah, that was like 2013, one Portal 2 run. It didn't even like go that well, but it was fun. And 2014 was like, yeah, all that really cool stuff happening. We had the Portal 1, Portal 2, and DK64 races. And then 2015, I had another Portal 2 run. And by then, I had gotten a lot better at the game. So, although I think I showed off a better run that year, I don't think I actually did as good of a job making it entertaining because for whatever reason, I was kind of like really in the grind and like I was letting the mistakes get to me more, which you shouldn't do in a live setting. Like I know that now, but
Yeah.
at the time I think I didn't like bring the same excitement. And so yeah, I kind of like slightly regret the way that I handled the 2015 run. But it is what it is. Like I learned from it.
Yeah.
And then I've participated in a lot of the 1545 marathon relay stuff, which isn't like a traditional marathon, like a GDQ, but it's like a team relay race of all the 3D collectible games from a certain era. So it's like the Rareware games. It's a major part of the Mario mainline series and Spyro game and Crash games. And it takes like a whole weekend to 100% all of them back to back. So I've been doing my part in the DK version of those, and just doing the DK 101% runs as part of the bigger marathon.
Yeah, the
And I
relay.
actually owe like 3 or 4 of my PBs to those marathons. That's a big
Oh.
part of like, I say like I've been running the game at least a little bit each year. A big part of that is because like for the last 5 or 6 years, I've like consistently done at least one 101 run each summer during that event. And like 3 times at least, I've gotten a new PB because I would practice for the event leading up to it. And then obviously I'm doing like a no reset run that day and I'm on a relay team, so I'm like motivated to play well. So yeah, things work out sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's a good excuse to get some PBs, I guess.
Yeah.
It helps
But
helps
yeah,
the relay.
yeah, for sure. Like I've always tried to get my relay team to win as much as I can. Although I don't think we've ever finished first somehow. But this just because the way they balance the teams. And
Yeah.
each team has like 10 or so runners. So just, things bounce different ways. But yeah. Um but yeah, as far as GDQ appearances, 2015 was the last time that I had like an actual showcase on their events. But I've been attending since I went to 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then COVID happened and then they went online. And I haven't been back to GDQ yet, but they didn't even have like a in-person one until just this year, right?
Oh, they had
Or was
S.
2023
Oh,
one
eight for
also?
AGDQ specifically. Yes, this
For
was the first.
specifically for AGDQ,
This
because
was the
SGDQ
first
is
one
like
since 2020. Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I missed one in
Yeah.
my region. I haven't been to SGDQ yet because it's sort of far away,
Yeah.
and I
Minneapolis.
didn't really like. I'm on the East Coast, and I only really had the bandwidth to like plan for one trip a year for the most part. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
It's definitely the more. It's definitely the like the original one. So.
Well, it's just because it's the one that is easier for me to travel
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I mean, that
Like
makes
I don't
sense. I
have
mean,
to
I was
get
gonna
on a
say.
plane to get there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. But yeah, they've had two other summer ones since after COVID. But yeah, this was
Right.
the first A. So. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely plan to go back to Games Done Quick at least a few more times, but I'll probably be like, depending who else is going or uh, if by some miracle I get to do another
Hmm.
run at the event, then I'd be happy to go and show DK64 off again.
Yeah, always possible. They'd
Yeah.
probably be keen to have that kind of like 5-person relay kind of thing you set
Yeah.
up. That.
We've submitted 101 like that. Like we've submitted 101 in general like every year and it just
Mm,
never gets in.
I
And
mean, it is
I'm
long,
hoping
but
that with the relay thing they'll take it at some point.
yeah. I
But
mean,
yeah, it's
obviously,
just
again,
long.
it's the length is part of it, but
The length is a huge part of it. It's a hard sell
mhm,
to take up a 6 hour time slot in a
yeah.
marathon.
But I
And
mean, they've had Final
yeah.
Fantasies that are like 8 hours, so I mean,
Yeah,
they
it
have
wouldn't be
done it.
the longest. They
No,
have done it, so maybe it'll be our turn
that'd be a
one
good
year.
finale too. Just this long, lengthy finale run.
Yeah, the run is not boring either.
It's
Like
no,
it's not. It's jam packed with stuff.
yeah. But yeah, they've been
It's
having a
just
lot
fun.
more relay stuff recently, so I have
Well,
faith it would happen someday. So
well, then
just
I'll
as you keep
definitely
going for it.
keep submitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. That'd be cool. So we'll see what the future holds, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, are there any other future plans you know about in terms of speedrunning?
Well, I've got to decide if I'm going to pace this
Mm,
year again in the summer. It was fun
gotta
going
see that
last
hot
year.
Mario 1 action.
Yeah. So I might be there, but it's not for sure yet.
Yeah.
More likely, I am going to be going to No Reset again this fall. Um, but just because it seems like there's like a similar group of DK runners that are going
Mm,
uh, similar to last year, so at least I know I'll have that group to do stuff with. And outside of that, I mean, you'll definitely catch me doing more one-on-one. Even though I did get the record back after not having it for a couple of years. Uh, like I know I can do like at least 2 minutes faster, maybe 3 minutes faster. Um, just like from what I've seen in my pacing on runs that died. If I kind of put together all the all the good sections of the runs that died. The holy grail right now would be like a sub 520, but that's like a
mm.
whole nother 5 minutes to save. I think I can get to like 521, but 519 is a little hard to visualize. But I don't know. I've surprised myself in the past with how much time could really be shaved off. So maybe we'll get there. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure like collectively as a community, we will get there at some point. It's just
Mm, yeah.
probably not like in the next 6 months to a year.
Well, never know, I guess.
You never know
So,
though.
yeah.
Yeah, it's up to us to put our put the work into it. But yeah, the
Indeed.
other thing is like speedrunning isn't my only hobby. Um, so I don't like I'm not like live doing it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I make music on the side
Mm,
as a hobby. Like actually, I have like keyboards set up over here and like guitars and bass in the corner over there.
nice.
And I've been working on songs as well. So yeah, I kind of have like a split focus sometimes. So when you see like sometimes I'll be like really working on a category and I'll be speedrunning, streaming like every week or every weekend for like a month or two or three straight, and then I might not be live for like 3 months in a row.
Hmm.
It just kind of depends on which of my hobbies are taking over at the time.
Makes sense. And it's a lot of work, so
Yeah,
gotta spread it
and then none
around.
of this is my day job, so I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
that.
of
You know,
course. That's how it goes.
yeah.
But yeah, is there anything you've done in your speedrunning career that we didn't touch on that you would like to talk
Hmm.
about?
Uh, Let me think. Well, definitely we've covered all the games,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I'm not gonna count Super Mario 64. I may have done like one 16-star run or something like that.
Yeah.
No, not counting that. Oh, Diddy Kong Racing. I didn't
Oh,
mention that one. I'm just
all right.
looking through my cartridges. Yeah. One of the GDQs I went to, there was a decent number of DKR runners, and so they were teaching me the mechanics of the game, and I was doing some time trial runs. But yeah, like that's it.
Okay,
Like I just kind of
fair
like
enough.
tried to get my PBs on the cart for individual tracks down a little bit here and there, and that's about the extent that I've ran that game. But it's
Fair
one of
enough.
those games that I like following the runs on Twitch. I actually spend a lot more time watching other runners on Twitch than I do running myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I like watching it too.
Yeah.
I definitely watch it more than I do it, and I do it a lot. So I just watch a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad we're like both active viewers
Yeah,
in that regard.
Twitch is always just on my other monitor,
Yeah,
unless I'm
it's like
live
open
streaming.
all the time in my free time, pretty
Hell,
much.
when I used to have a TV down here, and I would just have another person stream on the background while I streamed, and people would be like, "Oh, who you watching this time?" I'm like, So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Like when we finish
definitely.
up, I'm probably gonna go check to see how Alphonium's 101% run is doing because she's going for PB runs right now, and
Yeah,
she's like getting really good. She has a third place time right now. It's like roughly 10 minutes behind mine.
that's
So
pretty
no,
good.
not third place, fourth place. She's going for third place
Mm.
and getting close. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, uh, you satisfied with what we've discussed today?
I think so. I just noticed it's been a lot. Uh,
Oh
it's been
yeah,
a pretty long conversation as well.
it'd be like that,
And
but that's the
although I
point.
could go on, yeah, I'm happy to end it here.
Yeah, as long as you're happy, I'm happy, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I think we covered the important topics, so
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot to condense like 12
yeah,
years
of
into
course.
2.5 hours or however long it's been.
That's fair. But I think
Yeah.
we did a good job of it, so
Yeah.
yeah, we can
Thanks for
wrap
having
things
me
up.
and letting me talk about myself for a long time.
Yeah, well, feel free to shout yourself out as I do the
Yeah,
Twitch.
so you can watch me at twitch.tv/Znernicus. I also have a YouTube channel, Znernicus, and even like my music, I release it under Znernicus as the artist name. So
Mm,
my stuff is on Bandcamp as well as Znernicus Music YouTube channel. But
mm,
yeah, no, mainly you'll be finding me for the speedrun stuff. So usually I'm live on Twitch. Um, I don't have a schedule. Like I said, it's sort of like an on and off thing with
mm.
me, with my hobbies. So, um, but most likely you'll find me doing either bingo or 101%, or maybe any percent soon if Adam beats my record and then I want to try to beat him back. I don't know. Like, I definitely have this competitive side to me where I will try harder if other people are trying harder, you know?
Yep, that's how speedrunning goes. So that's the
Yeah.
big
Although it's
motivator.
always fascinated me, like, it's not that way for everybody.
No, it's
There
not.
are, like, certain speedrunners that are just, like, self-motivated and they'll just, like, push a category to great lengths without anybody else trying to push it alongside them. And I admire those people, but I'm not one of them.
Yeah,
At least there's a limit to how much I push myself on my own.
that's fair. You know,
Yeah.
we all get our motivation in different ways, so whatever works.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But yeah. Thanks again.
yeah, thanks for being on. Thanks everyone for watching. Check out Twitch and YouTube for episodes either live or on Sundays on YouTube. Um, all the links to the guest and myself are easily found in the description, so click on those and whatnot, I guess. And I guess we are done here, so yep. Take care, everyone.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.